Welcome to the Normal America Show. I'm your host, Rob Noller. We got a Friday morning call-in show. We probably won't have many people watching because my audience are, I think, the type of people that are probably sleeping in till noon, like I used to be before I really got my life together. And you have to understand, you can't do that. You can't be sleeping until noon. It's bad habits. You need to wake up at a reasonable hour. That's why for the past few years of my life, I've been working real hard at getting up at 11 a.m. I think it's really made me more productive. That's how real adults do things. Drag yourself out of bed at the early hour of 11 a.m. and I do get the Australians and the Europeans on these morning shows. So if you're wondering why I'm doing an early show, one, sometimes I like to mix it up a little, anyways. But second, birthday party for my wife's brother today, so it should be a lot of fun. So that's going to be this evening, and I think, weather cooperating, this will be the first fire of the year where I don't know, I assume a lot of people watching have done these sort of shenanigans where you have a fire in the backyard and everybody sits around and makes mountain pies and good stuff, you know that sort of stuff. So I'm excited. I think it'll be a good evening. uh should reactivate X and send me back. Oh, okay. um Yeah, it should be a good show, though. So we'll take call ins on pretty much any topic. It's nice to see so many of you up here early this morning. Appreciate it. Tried to chum in the lefties here with the title of my video. If you're a lefty and you've never seen me, call in. We'll give you equal amounts of time to talk as me. Sorry, having a little screen issues there. You could tell me how stupid I am or how bad Trump is and all that good stuff. And I'll probably crush you like usually happens, but that's okay. It's fun. It's all good fun. Let's see what we got to talk about here to start with. There's some silliness before we get. Oh, I thought one of the things I would do, we'll wait here a little, but I'll show you how I do a short video because I'm trying to do shorts every day to be uploaded at 2 p.m. And I might have to double book here, do the live stream and do a short video. Now, I could always edit a portion of this live stream out and just make it a short. But I'm an idiot and I'm really bad at editing. That's why I have a fantastic editor, one of the best editors out there, Black Elk, helping me with doing stuff. But he does so much for me already. He's not going to edit the shorts on top of editing the regular videos and all the production stuff that he's doing behind the scenes. So I'll use my trusty phone and I'll make a short video while we're doing this. Yeah, Grid's a great guy, man. I'm sure I'll be working with Grid more. He is fantastic. What am I chatting about? Nate says, oh, whatever people want to talk about. If no one calls in, we'll do a show. I'll come up with topics. Don't worry. But hopefully we could chum some people in on a call. The other thing that's sometimes difficult with doing a morning show, if you do a late show and you go for 2 hours, and then you do a morning show, it's not like the news cycle's changed a lot in between, 9 p.m. last night and 9 a.m. today. So that's one of the things I found, that the debates are fine. Like talking to people, debates, stuff like that, fine, no problem. If I go till 2 a.m. and I do a 7-hour stream, no problem. But sometimes when I just get to rambling and I'll do like a 6 hour stream, without call-ins, without a debate or anything, what you find out is the next day you're like, oh yeah, I don't know what to talk about. I pretty much said everything I have to say yesterday. So what am I going to talk about today? That's why I look at people that are more successful than me as far as the audience and things of that nature. Like Scott Adams. Scott Adams has an hour to an hour and a half show every day. That's pretty good. I think that's probably as good as it goes. Kamala says, debate me, fat boy, 300-pound lard butt. At my heaviest, I weighed 320. That was years ago, though, so I think I weigh 260 now. So, ha! Joke's on you. I'm a 260-pound lard butt. But, yeah, Kamala, if you want to debate, you call in. Are you sober at this hour? I don't know. Now, there's 2 ways to do this, by the way. I don't know what you all think about this. I have been having people call in via the Discord, but actually I could send you an invite straight to my StreamYard, which might be easier. So we'll try that. So if anyone wants to call in, just let me know. We could do either. For some reason, though, and I think I figured this out last night. I don't know what it is, if it's just that most people have their mics jacked up when they call in, or if it's something to do with Discord. But when I'm talking, like, apparently my guests are always like 50% louder than me. So when I slide their volume on Discord down to 50%, then it comes off as being reasonable. Maybe that won't be the case if people call in directly through Discord or through StreamYard. So I don't know. So we'll try that. To get started, in fact, why don't we just do this now? Why don't we just do my YouTube short now? So I'll show you the process here. I open my phone here and I go to YouTube and I'll click short. I usually click so it could be 3 minutes. And then I'll do something like this so that I have a background that's sort of reasonable. We'll get the mic out here a little so maybe it picks it up, but it doesn't show up in my, okay. All right. Then I'll come up with a topic. I'll be like, let's think of a topic. So, all right, I got a topic in my head. I almost never have a script or anything. Most of the time, I could do it in one take. Yesterday's short I did downstairs, and my son was on the couch next to me, and he had something really exciting to tell me in the middle of my short, so I had to restart it. Nate, come on, leave shorts alone. They're not way. All right, here we go. I find it absolutely hilarious that we're at a point where the lefties that I interact with and debate on places like X and other places are now vehemently arguing for Democrats to shut down the government. Isn't this hilarious how far we've came? So these same people told us, "Oh my goodness, shutdowns will impact millions of people. People will die. That's how important the government is." And now they're yelling at Chuck Schumer, "How dare you not have a shutdown? It's ridiculous." If you need a better example of how far Democrats have fallen, other than just their terrible, terrible polling numbers that show that they're in the 20%, look no further than their vehement defenders can't decide whether or not they want the government to shut down. The truth is, they're scared to death that a lot of their money laundering schemes through places like USAID, places like ActBlue, are going to be discovered, and they want to use lawfare and every other trick in the book to prevent that from being found out. The problem is, with the shutdown, all that will do is allow Trump to keep open the essential parts of government that he sees fit, while simultaneously proving to the American people how our huge, bloated federal government isn't necessary. So on one hand, they don't want to fund the CR because they think it'll fund Doge and other things that'll ultimately go after their fraudulent enterprises. But on the other hand, if they put for a government shutdown, that means that people will realize how wasteful and fraudulent so much of the government is. Truly a good day to watch these lefties squirm, and a good day for America as we hopefully follow through with these promises, shrink the size of the federal government, get rid of the fraud and waste, bring back manufacturing to this country, lower inflation, and all Americans, even these meatheads who, except the ones that are directly getting money from USAID that are Democrats, will benefit significantly from it. There we go. All right. So we've successfully completed our short. Now, what I like to do is I hit the button. Guy sounds great. And I always title it. We'll go Democrats fallen. Oh, no, that's not good. I tried to try GOV shutdown. And I typed HIV. That's not it. Then I copy. There. Hit the caption button. Isn't this why you guys are getting to see how the sausage is made here? There we go. It's that simple. And then I titled it, put the captions, and I. So it's really funny because, like, sometimes I'm like, oh man, I got to do a short because I think consistency is very important. I don't really give a shit if people watch my shorts, to be honest. I much prefer the live streams. That's what I like to do. But I think it helps with the algorithm on places like YouTube if you're consistently putting material up. So I'm trying every day, every single day at 2 p.m. Eastern time to upload a short. So sometimes I upload them early like this, and then you can schedule it. But if anyone out there is looking to get into sort of streaming and whatever, TikToks are absolute garbage. So if you just want to do shorts, it's that simple on YouTube. YouTube should be sending me money for promoting their product, right? I don't get shit from YouTube. There you go. Now it's scheduled to upload at 2 p.m. Eastern, so you'll be able to watch that short at 2 p.m. Eastern. Just like that. We're done. Excellent. Is there a filter that makes me look thinner? I don't believe so. I wish. Technology has not advanced that far. Contemporary Compendium for $5. Thank you. Says early morning Rob stream during work hours. Yes, please. You're welcome. It's my pleasure. It really is. John Beard, $2 says, good morning, Rob. Vegemite with government cheese, USAID. Oh man, Vegemite. Good. No. I tried it once, and granted, I was like in 4th grade. It left such a bad taste in my mouth, literally, that I don't think I would ever try it again. It was terrible. Was it like fermented beer foam or some shit into a paste? Yeah, so here's the deal. Anyone who wants to call into the show, we'll try to go through StreamYard. If you can't figure that out, we could go through Discord. Any topic that you want, as long as it falls within terms of service. If it's a topic that I don't have much to talk about or things of that nature, then we might move on quickly. If there's a lot of people that call in, we may move on quickly. If no one's calling in and you're the only one, then you may get to talk to me for like an hour or two. So we'll just see how it goes. Any topic that you all are interested in, pretty much. So if you want that link, I'll put the Discord link out, and I hesitate to do this, but I also will put the stream. In fact, let's put the StreamYard link out. This. All right. So here's the link to the StreamYard. You don't have to download anything to StreamYard. It's just a URL, I believe. So. Oh, thank you so much, Blaster. But another $10 for Hank's Dinosaur Fund. Why? Because pterodactyls are cool. Yesterday with the dinosaurs, he had a little velociraptor, and he had me play with like all of his other bigger dinosaurs, and they were all the villains. My guys were the villains. And his raptor apparently had robot wings and was beating up all of mine. Also, he somehow was like, everything was always beating up. Oh, we'll beat up that guy or whatever. And now it's kill. I'm going to kill that guy. And I don't know. Part of me is like, yeah, get him. But the other part of me is like, well, we don't have to kill. We can just beat him up. My son's going through his, Batman versus Punisher phase here. So I feel like Punisher's winning out. Baryonyx. He has one of those too. Is that a real one, or is that one of the Jurassic Park's made up ones? But he has it. He loves his dinosaurs. So, yeah, we'll talk about what I talked about in the short there. Isn't it funny? Like, I'm watching Pisco last night, and like all of these lefties, like the Progressive Victory Pack lefties, are like freaking out. They're like, oh my God, Chuck Schumer said he's going to vote for the CR. You must vote against it. You must vote against it. So when you hear Chuck Schumer say, trust me, no Democrat wants a shutdown, it's absurd. Absolutely, they definitely want a shutdown. As I said in the short there, the truth is that they're worried that if the government continues to get funded and it's investigating places like Act Blue and USAID, that will negatively affect Democrats. But at the same time, a shutdown is going to negatively affect them. So their goal is, well, we're going to push for a shutdown and then say, it's Republicans' fault. It's Republicans' fault. They have a bill there. The only way the bill won't get passed is if we filibuster it, but we should. And then we'll say, it's Republicans' fault. Now, again, I want you to take a moment and think, if there would ever be a chance that these same people cheering for that would say that it's Democrats' fault, if they were in the majority and Republicans decided to filibuster, do you think for 1 second they would be like, it's Democrats' fault? Of course not. But it's so funny to see these people out there because they don't know what to do. They're lost. They like all they could say is like, well, we don't like these employees being fired. Like, why? What's the judge that just installed all these probationary employees? Okay, they were fired. Did you notice the government going to pot without them? I didn't. Same would be true of a shutdown. Even with the fraud and waste and stuff, they're just like, well, you can't do this. It's a chainsaw, not a scalpel. The truth is they don't want it dealt with. They don't. Look, let me make it real simple for you. Why are Democrats so vehemently against things like paper ballots and same-day election voting and voter ID? Why are they so against it? They'll give you a bunch of reasons, but we all know the reason they're against it. We all know. It's because they want a system that is easy to cheat. That's what they want. The same is true of this. They don't want a hard look at the books on places like USAID because they know that it massively benefits them. The institutional benefit that the lefties are used to is mind-blowing. Again, I go back to when did the anger really start at Elon Musk? When he bought Twitter. Fuba Boy, great name, says, but isn't it true that voter fraud is very rare? It's true that it's very rare that it's found. Maybe it's very rare. Scott Adams talks about this amazingly. If we have systems that are easy to cheat with, eventually they will be cheated. And our voting system clearly is easy to cheat. There's been testimony after testimony of people that have walked in and in 5 minutes showed how they could hack the voting systems. We know this. You're sending out ballots to everyone. The Social Security list, right, that came out, and it was like, oh, you heard Trump talk about it during his not State of the Union. Yeah, I like Scott Adams a lot. They're like, oh, we found all these people, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people over the age of 150, 160, whatever. That's how our voter rolls are. All the time. And they're always fighting to clean up. No, we don't want to clear out the voter rolls of the people that have moved or the people that have passed away. We don't want to do it. We don't want to clear them up. But we also want to send mail-in ballots to everyone. And we totally assume that when those go out and they come back, yep, the right person filled it out. You remember the poll that showed that it was like 1/3 of Democrats admitted that they had filled out their spouse's ballot? That's election fraud. You can't do that. You're not allowed to do that. That's a crime. 1/3 admitted in a poll. They didn't even know it was a crime. Yeah, I do that. They set these systems up that are easily exploitable, knowing that it'll advantage them in the end. But you're right. There's never a serious federal investigation that goes into these things. Yeah, I saw it, DSK. Thanks, man. I see a lot of the doxing that's going on. All right, we got a guest here. Oh, let's read this super chat first. Mr. Belay in the Department of Numismatics. I have to plead ignorance on what numismatics is. $10. Thank you so much. If chickens are descendants of dinosaurs, can we conclude that dinosaurs taste like chicken? That would explain a lot. Interesting. My guess is they would be. I've ate alligator, which might be closer to dinosaur, though I'm not sure. It's not bad. When I was in Orlando, there was a dude standing at a stop sign on the side of the road selling jerky. And that's like right up my alley for weird stuff. So I was like, yeah, we'll do that. All right, we got Ben. Ben, can you hear me?
Hey, Rob, how's it going?
Doing great. What's up today?
Awesome. Now, I was just wondering when we can start calling these things insurrection.
What specifically are you talking about? Like the Trump Tower business that happened yesterday?
Yeah. That'd be a good start, yeah.
Well, so it's interesting. If you use the definition of insurrection that people like Destiny and Pisco that I've debated use, then these would be insurrections. There were 4 parts to that. Let me see if I could remember what their definition said. 1, it had to be a gathering of people, more than one person. Clearly, it meets that criteria. 2nd, it had to be that it was for a public issue. Right? So, for example, if me and you and 20 people get together and we start rioting because we want our friend Bill broken out of prison, that wouldn't qualify as an insurrection. But if we start rioting because we want the law that Bill was arrested for, say tax evasion, we want that law revoked, then that could be an insurrection because it's focused on the broader law. I think that's true of, I think this Trump Tower business would meet that qualification, right? Because Trump is an executive and they want Trump and Doge out and lawful orders that Doge is doing. And so, or I don't even know. What the hell was it? Were they protesting over the Khalil guy? Is that what it was?
I believe so, yeah.
Yeah. So like sort of deportation type orders and things like that. So yeah, that would meet that criteria. 3rd would have to be that it used violence or intimidation. Certainly the amount of people there, the way they were screaming and the things they were saying, that, for example, you had people shouting that they supported Hamas and things like that, that it's a violent terrorist organization. That would meet the criteria of violence or intimidation. And the 4th, I forget what the 4th part of it is. Has to be more than one person, has to be for a community thing, violence, intimidation. I think that's pretty much it. So according to their definitions, that's an insurrection.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's why I argued how absurd their definitions were every time I debated them. And Andrew Wilson did the same thing. Their definition's too broad. If you remember when Andrew Wilson debated Destiny on this, he got Destiny to admit that if 3 hippies got together and were protesting smoking pot and that it should be legal, and they started shoving the police officers, that's an insurrection. Now, why does this matter? Well, 2 reasons. One, it legally matters because there are crimes on the books that could be charged based on having an insurrection. The one that matters the most in the case that we were talking about when we were debating them was that anyone who engages in an insurrection and held a public office is no longer able to hold public office again. That's why they tried to keep Trump off the ballot. They said he engaged in an insurrection. Using their very loose definition of insurrection, there would be thousands of insurrections every year. Many of the Black Lives Matter protests would be insurrections. So why wouldn't those Democrats that engaged in that also be kept off the ballot? Well, that's, you know the answer to that. They don't give a shit about the double standard. So the real issue with that was, did Trump engage in the insurrection? Which the answer is no. Their definition is too broad, but even if you say that's what an insurrection is, Trump did not engage with it. That's number one. The second thing is more nefarious, though. It's the term itself. Forget about the legal nature of it. It's how you could control the narrative by using that term, right? They are insurrectionist, and what that means. And so, yeah, I think you can call them insurrectionist. Why not? Seems fair to me. And I think that all the people that screamed, "Oh my God, we can't deal with insurrectionists," now need to face facts that almost the entirety of their party is sympathetic to insurrectionists.
So why do you think we don't take left-wing violence as seriously? Is it because the mainstream media has that sort of bias where, it's a big deal when, conservatives do something like this, but not when liberals do? Because I feel like we're really desensitized to it because it happens all the time.
It's because almost every institution in this country views the left-wing violence as acceptable and beneficial to them.
Like moral.
They are their brown shirts, right?
Right.
They want let's take our politics out of it for a second, right? Do you remember there was this moment on Bill Maher's show way back before Sam Cedar totally lost his mind, where Sam Cedar's a guest and Ben Affleck was a guest? And Sam
Harris.
Oh, yeah. Did I say Sam Harris? I'm so sorry. Thank you. Yeah, not Sam Cedar. Yeah, I don't know that he's ever not been full of it. Anyway, Sam Harris, he's making this point about Islam. And it's a prudent point. It still applies in today's world. He's like, actually, most polling, when they poll people of the Islamic faith in a lot of these countries, only like 5% of them are willing to personally use violence to achieve their religious goals. But the problem is the next group, which is like 15 to 20%, that themselves won't engage in violence, but they support or accept the 5% that do. Now, why would they do that? Well, and then, of course, Ben Affleck's like, that's gross. That's gross. It's like, yeah, deal with the argument, dude. The point is, if you remember back then, you had all of these attacks like the Charlie Hebdo attack, where they went in, where there was Muhammad in a satirical magazine in France, and they went into this newspaper studio and gunned down and killed all these people that worked there. And then you had the Dutch picture of Muhammad with a bomb on his head, and all of these people rioted, and there was a bunch of death threats over that, etc. And then you could go back even further with the Satanic Verses written by Salman Rushdie, where there was a fatwa put on him, a price put on his head. Was it effective? Well, no newspaper in the United States would show those pictures, would they? South Park tried to depict Muhammad, and they got shit on for it. No, you can't do it, said Comedy Central. The truth is, even though most Muslims, in fact, the majority of Muslims probably find that behavior despicable, over 50%. And it's only a small portion, though, if you're talking billions of people, 5% is a huge number that's willing to use violence, but it's relatively a small percentage that's willing to use the violence. But there's so many people that are like, I guess we're getting our way. I guess that's not bad. They learned, didn't they? They're not going to show those pictures anymore, are they? And it's weird because as someone like me that decries political violence all the time, the truth is, It can be effective, at least in short-term goals, but it can only be effective when the situation's right. The reason that left-wing violence has been effective is because it's been seen as useful from the people in charge of these institutions. So when you see Chris Wray say, the head of the FBI say, well, Antifa's just an idea. Now, you could go back years and you could see even at the start of the Proud Boys were basically just like an adult fraternity. It was stupid. Like Gavin Newsom was one of the dudes that created it. They were just like drinking buddies that to get what do they call it? Jumped into the Proud Boys. They would all punch you in the arm while you had to name like 20 cereals. Like that's how childish it was. It was just like, but what happened was they saw that you had all these right-wing rallies, not even protests, just like rallies where these Antifa people were showing up with weapons and beating the shit out of people. And so they were like, yeah, we're going to show up. And if Antifa shows up, we're going to fight back. And that's what happened. And and there's websites that, there's material that's put out by these Antifa groups. They're easy to find, but the FBI is like, oh, we don't know about none of that. It's just an idea. Like being Antifa is just like being Federalist. Same thing. It's just a political ideology. It's not, these aren't groups. These aren't people doing things. And so what happens is what they're really saying is we don't mind what Antifa's doing. We don't like the populist movement. So we're okay with people being afraid. Right now, we see all of this doxing occurring, right? I'll be honest with you. I love doing what I do. Everything that I say here, I sincerely believe. I hope that it helps drive the country in a better direction. I sincerely do. And it's not just this. I do things like knocking on doors, and I've, called, trying to get elections, and I show up to Republican meetings, and I do this and that, I hope that the country goes in a better direction. I do. And I'm entertained by it. It's my hobby. This is what I like doing. But I love my family first. If I got swatted every day, would I continue this? I don't know. And they know that fear being out there will dox you, will swat you, will call your place of employment, will get you fired, will make your life a living hell. Well, why isn't anyone taking this seriously? And you might say, well, now they'll start to. This has been going on for years. How many times has Tim Pool been swatted? Mm-hmm. They just don't give a shit. Because deep down, these establishment institutions, the same ones, if you saw my debate with Connor, right, where I was talking about like, look, we see how the National Endowment of Democracy gets money from the taxpayers and then pressures foreign governments like Poland to arrest populist candidates in Poland. And Connor's like, that's fine. Populism sucks. Well, if our foreign policy apparatus feels that way globally, which they do, and you could listen to Mike Benz talk about this a lot, you don't think they feel about that domestically with populism back home? So are they going to be chomping at the bit to arrest people that are physically harassing populists or Christians? Again, if you even stand outside an abortion clinic and pray, you're looking at 10 years at jail with the FBI showing up with guns drawn in front of your children, dragging you out of your house. If you bomb pro-life centers or, vandalize them in any way, would Chris Wray say, well, most of those crimes occur in the evening, so we've had difficulties? It's always the same. The FBI is used to go after angry parents at school board meetings. But how much left-wing violence do we see all the time? And it's just like, I mean, and it goes right down to, it's so sad because you could get down, like, why don't they crack down on, like, inner-city violence, right? And a lot of it has to do with, they just don't give a shit. They see it as partially useful. And yes, I'm talking to you, Black community. They want that violence occurring in your communities. They do. That's why it's allowed to carry on. But boy, oh boy, man, if you're a right-winger who even showed up on January 6th and did nothing, they're going to find your ass, man. The sedition hunters are all over you. So I guess to answer your question, why don't we take left-wing violence seriously? Because these institutions that have shaped our discourse and shape our policy and legal system, they don't mind the left-wing violence. They find it to be useful. As soon as it's not useful, then they'll take it seriously. And then all of a sudden we'll be like, oh. So for example, if the left-wing violence would start targeting left-wing institutions, if Antifa would have followed Christopher Wray home and tried to break into his house, it would have been a serious deal. Now, oh my goodness, you can't do that, But as long as it's Tucker Carlson or it's Rand Paul being beat up or it's conservatives that are getting swatted, or it's Donald Trump's building that's getting overwhelmed. Hey, and they'll say when pressed on it, they'll be like, yeah, that's not a good thing. But January 6th, you remember that? That's what they'll do. But the truth is, many of the people that are like, yeah, it's not a good thing, they don't really care. They don't care at all. And hey, if an added bonus to that is it helps keep populism down and conservatism down, so be it.
Yeah, it's whatever they can concede to that they don't mind conceding to. It's not a moral principle. Like it's convenient for them to not like be Biden fans because you can't say anything about Biden. They'll be like, yeah, XYZ that he did was bad. Yeah, it was bad, but that doesn't hurt their position of the anti-Trump thing. So
that's exactly right. That's what they always do. And
it's
I've told this story many times, but one of the first times I debated Brianna Wu, like she, they, whatever. Don't ban me, YouTube, like Twitch, you fucking idiot. Anyways, we were talking about, it was Connor on the panel, and it was Destiny was on there, Brianna, and some other people, and it was, is the Trump case with the classified documents, does it show that Trump did something really bad, or is it an evidence of double standards that we've seen from places like the FBI? Of course, I'm arguing that it's double standard, and not to go through the entire debate, but I'm able to, like, it's so funny because when they start, I'm like, well, what's really bad that Trump did? Well, he tried to move boxes. He said that's what he did. It wasn't just a classified. He didn't cooperate. He moved boxes. And you're like, oh, okay. So
if I had my eyes closed, I would think that was her.
It's pretty good, right? Yeah. So so it's obstruction of justice. Oh. And it's like, well, did they get those boxes back? Yeah, I guess. Okay. Well, when Hillary's team got a lawful subpoena to submit emails, they deleted them. And they never got those back. That's clearly obstruction of justice, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I guess. And so when you go through it, and then like you start to talk about it, and they try to ignore that can't be true. That can't be true. Yeah, it's true. Here's the proof. Well, it was a long time ago. Nonetheless, it happened. And then what she ultimately say at the end? She goes, I guess then Hillary's team should have been charged. But they weren't.
Right.
That's the issue. That's why it's a double standard. But you can say that now. You would have never said that in 2016.
Right.
When the election was coming, you would have never said it. But now that Hillary's not running for office, sure. And the Clintons have a rich history of this. It's like #BelieveAllWomen. And yet Bill Clinton speaking at all of your fundraisers? Well, I guess Clinton was bad. I guess, yeah, we should have believed his victims and blah, 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 blah. Oh, but it doesn't negatively affect the party now, so you're just like, moving on. And then the few times they'll point to, they'll be like, okay, but what about Al Franken? It's like, right, getting Al Franken off basically still guaranteed that Democrats would control that Senate seat. The same with Bob Menendez. But how about when it would have negatively affected and caused another election that Democrats may have lost? Like Keith Ellison, where we had on tape his wife filming that she was beaten, talking to the police in real time. #BelieveAllWomen, right? No, not at all.
Keith Ellison, when Biden was running for president and he was accused. Yep.
Remember, Kamala Harris said she believed the women.
Right.
She believed them. And so then why are you working for this guy? You believe that this guy at best is a serial sexual harasser? And you're like, now, I understand those women said, well, we're still going to vote for Biden. That's fine, right? But still, that's your boss. You believe him? By the way, she also claimed that he was a racist because he was against busing. So she was willing to take the VP job for a racist sexual harasser. Yep. Great job, Kamala. There's a person of principles, huh? But it would have been different if she would have said, I don't believe it. Then that's different, but
to be fair, I know it's a little bit different, but you could make the same or similar argument for the Vance Trump.
Well, that's true with him saying that, but he did answer for it. Kamala never answered. Vance was like, yeah, I bought into the mainstream press, and it was when I said that he was, Hitlerian or whatever, and I was wrong to do so. Kamala never said, yeah, you know what? It turns out that first off, it's hilarious that the press never asked her, which I remember back in the day screaming in 2020. It's like, when's someone from the press going to ask her about this?
Right.
Which of course they never did. But second, her answer would have, I know her answer would have been like, buh, 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 and they would have skipped over it. But probably the acceptable answer would have been like, listen, I looked into it. I no longer think that it was as it was advertised. I've talked to Joe. I think that maybe there was a misunderstanding, and I regret saying that I believed him during, while I was running against him. That would have been at least an answer.
Mhm.
Instead, the one time she was asked, she basically said like, "Oh, people say things during a campaign." Okay, yeah, people say your record on the economy sucks, and then they go to work for you. They don't say you're a serial sexual harasser, and then go to work for you. That seems a bit more. Do you mind if I read a couple super chats real quick?
Yeah, go for it.
Vita for $5 says insurrection defined by destinies. One, a concerted effort by a group, right? We got that. Second, resistance to a law or government proceeding, right? We got that. The proceeding of kicking Khalil out. Use of force, which can be physical or intimidation, right? We have that. For the public purpose or a national grievance, right? So yeah, according to Destiny's definition, yes, the Trump Tower, but all of these, like every time you see them, how many times have we seen them occupy a government building?
Oh, constantly.
It's constant.
Kavanaugh
Which would
hearings.
almost every time meet their definition. Almost every time.
Yep.
And then Max Reddick, thanks so much, says, Savage Rub's my favorite rub. Keep up the great work, brother. Thank you, Max, for the $5. I really appreciate it. I really do.
So one thing that's been bothering me a lot lately, and I fall into the same category as what I'm about to say. I don't think you do, but it's annoying how I like when people, okay, let me ask you this. What percentage of people that talk about politics, whether it's just somebody like commenting online to whatever, what percentage of them do you think actually care about politics?
It's a difficult question. I think everyone cares about politics at some level. So you could say, well, 100%. For example, you care, let's say the lefty commentators, they truly think Trump's evil, or they, to some level, they think he's a horrible guy. So I guess they care at that level. How much do they care as much as they pretend? Probably 20%. I think there's a lot of, to get to to what you're saying, there's a lot of people that this is a job or a potential job, or this is social clout. And so they'll come on and they'll say what they think they're supposed to say. It's a difficult conversation, Ben, because it gets to a secondary conversation, which is like, well, how many people really know what they're talking about when they're talking? You may ask, what about Rob? Does he really know what he's talking about? I try to stay in my lane, and I try to debate people a lot so that if I'm totally full of it, then it would be evident. But like, I'll see people on both sides of the ledger that are getting huge views, and they're just saying insane batshit stuff. Like, there's this guy I've seen several times pop up, and I guess that the outrage is the point. And he every day is like putting out TikTok videos like, tonight's the night that Trump gets arrested. The Secret Service is going to turn on him, and they're going to bring him out in shackles tonight. And it's like, it doesn't happen. Like, this same dude was saying Trump will never be sworn in. And then once he was sworn in, oh, okay, well, they did that because, before he gives his first speech, they're going to lock him up in front of the cameras and blah, blah, blah. And that guy's going to get more views than me. Does he really believe that? No. The guy doesn't believe it. He just understands, like, yeah. But let's take it a bit further. If Lauren Southern and Destiny really believe the shit they're talking about, they banging each other? Right? Like, there certainly starts to be a point. Maybe they do. Maybe it's just the physical attraction was so intense.
Yeah, no.
Maybe that's the issue. But I think it's fair to ask. When you see these people that are just like, and I think obviously I'm biased, but I think the problem's far worse on the left, that are performative. Like, let's just get right down to brass tacks. If you really think Trump's Hitler, okay, then what's the consequence of that? How far are you willing to take it? Mm-hmm. How many people say that? And not just the people online streaming, but like the people you see on these CNN panels that'll be saying this stuff, and you'll see Scott Jennings bring it up. You'll be like, okay, well, if you really think that, then what's the obvious implication here? And it's like you hear all these Democrats, Trump is Hitler, and then you see pictures of them like at dinners and stuff, shaking hands with them, smiling. Like, not from the 90s, like now, like Chuck Schumer, Nancy Pelosi, these people. It's like the outrage machine, and unfortunately what happens is there are people that take it serious. That's why I think that there is a duty as a streamer, even if you're only streaming to one person, you should make it clear that there are boundaries that people shouldn't cross. And I try to do that all the time. I talk about issues that I think are very serious that could lead to the destruction of our country. For example, the debt. There is a solid chance that if we don't rein in debt, that the country we know today will not exist by the time my son is 40, by the time my son's my age. And that's serious. I take that very seriously. But is it worth throwing my life away? Is it worth saying, well, then the tree of liberty needs to be refreshed by the blood of tyrants and blah, blah, blah? No. And I try to say all the time, there are more important things in your life. Build personal relationships, get married, have a child. You know, at the end of the day, we're all dust. Your relationship with God, your relationship with your spouse, with your children, with your parents, with your community, that all means more. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't push for, you know, things, but keep it in perspective. Don't piss your life away, you know. Then, you know, counter that to, you want to see a video real quick? Here, let me show you a video. I saw this today. Let's see if I can bring it up. You might be interested in this. Oh, crap. I think it was Ian. I hate Ian Miles Chung. I really do. But he curates a bunch of stuff. You see a lot of videos on his channel.
I don't know if I'm familiar with that name.
Oh, he's a sack of he's okay. So I'm gonna share the screen here with you, and everyone can see. How do I do this? Oh, I can't do full screen. There we go. Sorry, you got to deal with boomer tech issues here.
Don't worry, Rob. I've watched it for a while.
Yeah, there you go. You know what you're in for. Okay.
You and Grid one.
Grid's a good guy, man. I like Grid. All right, here's Vaush. Let's hear what Vaush has to say. A nice 40-second clip. You ready? I hope you can hear this. We'll go.
Remember when Nancy Pelosi's husband was attacked by a crazy person with a hammer, and they laughed at it on the right? There's no way through this in like a reconciliatory fashion, you know? Our enemies are Nazis, they're evil. They are not people the way that we're people. I mean, we're talking about like Elon Musk, man. We're talking about the sickest motherfuckers in the world. We're talking about like we're talking about like the denigration of this country on every possible level, spiritual, symbolic, and practical outcome. They hate you. They would see hundreds of millions of people deprived of health care and basic human rights to slightly inflate the stock price of a few, and not even successfully. Like they're just attempting to. They're just stupid.
There you go. We're all Nazis. You see? We're not even people in the way that you would think of people. Now,
I was so happy. I think you might have said it yesterday because before hearing you say what I'm about to say, I was saying the same point, which was, you know what's worse than all these descriptions of Elon Musk? The end of the world with global warming, except when it's not. Because actually, you know, electric cars now, it's a... Who cares about that? You know, we got bigger fish to fry with Elon Musk, but we'll care about global warming later.
You're exactly right. It's always this issue today is the end of the world, and we have to do everything. The rules are off the table. Everything, you know, global warming, it's so bad. We got to vandalize paintings and attack people and this, that, and the other because global warming is the single biggest issue. Oh, what's that? The guy that owns the single biggest electric car company that we've been celebrating is very important. Now he has politics on the other side of me. Then vandalize and destroy that company.
Yep.
Like, wait, what? By the way, how much carbon do you think is being put in the air when they try to burn down buildings and things like that? Killing two birds with one stone, I guess. But there you see from Vaush, right? Like, I remember when Vaush said about Patriot Prayer. So there was this rally in Portland where they had a permit. This right-wing group, Patriot Prayer. And yeah, some of it was childish. They were on pickup trucks with American flags and holding guns. Lawfully, they're allowed to open carry. But you might be like, okay, whatever, you know. And there they were in Portland. And after the rally, there was a gentleman, I wish I knew his name. I feel terrible about this. But that was walking down the street, and a guy that was basically an Antifa member walks up to him, point blank, shoots him, kills him. And after that incident, many months afterwards, so Vaush is aware of that incident. He's talking about that rally, Patriot Prayer, and he says, because he believes there's a, quote, trans genocide, he says, I want a world where people are taking pot shots out their window at Patriot Prayer. In other words, shooting out their window at people that are lawfully at a rally. That's the world he wants. And I brought up what a disgusting of a thing. Now, notice that's not going to get him kicked off YouTube. That's not going to get him kicked off of all the platforms he's on. If I say, I think maybe that virus came from a lab in Wuhan, oh boy, oh shit, bring out the censorship. You know, if you use the wrong pronoun, we have such a trans genocide. If you use the wrong pronouns for someone, you get a 30-day ban on Twitch, you know. But, you know, calling for shooting people that are lawfully protesting, well, what Hassan do? He called for the murder of Rick Scott. What did he get? A day and a half ban? That's what he ended up with, you know. But I had Connor on my show screaming homophobic slurs. He got a 7-day ban. I got a 30.
Yeah.
That's
well,
also
and this isn't like exactly what you're talking about, but it kind of like plays off of it. Just in general, and you've mentioned it before, I totally agree, which is that you know, conservatives bring up, you know, issues such as what you're talking about, and you know, it's not acknowledged, but then later on is, you know, the liberals, once they have to acknowledge it, they say, yeah, it was bad, sorry.
Destiny, I remember one time we were talking about the FISA abuses. You know, I've shown people this before. Like, hell, let's do it. We'll see if I can find this as I'm talking. I think I have this saved. Yeah. October 26, 2017, I wrote a big write-up on this website Above Top Secret about the dossier being used to get a FISA warrant against Trump. I was talking about this shit way back there, arguing with all these people. It's a lie. It's a lie. You're wrong. You're stupid. I can't believe you believe this. And then finally, after years and years and years, where they have to admit everything I said was true, the FISA warrants were illegal, they're just like, it's not that big of a deal. It was a long time ago. That's what Destiny said. So what? It's a long time ago.
Yeah.
A long time ago. When I had that conversation with Destiny and he said that, the revelations of the FISA warrants being illegal, there was less time that happened in between that than now and January 6th, which is all Destiny talks about.
Dude,
do we say, oh, that was a long time ago? Forget about it. It was a long time ago.
Right.
Of course not. To them, that's seminal. We have to talk about it. Every time you talk about left-wing violence, you have to bring up January 6th. You know? So it really is like, and you know, when I was pointing out Vaush saying that about that violence, I had lefty after lefty that was willing to call in and say, oh, how dare you? He's not really calling for violence. He said to shoot at people out windows. like to listen to them, and it's the cognitive dissonance that they have is so mind-blowing to me. It's absolutely mind-blowing. They'll be like you could be like, you know, we need to fight like hell, and they're like, that's a clear call to violence. Clear call to violence. It's like, well, no, that's just colloquially how politics works. People say we got to fight for our issues. You know, now that's clear call to violence. But the guy saying to take shots at people out windows, well. And it's the same with Destiny. He says saying fight like hell. You saw it the other day on the channel, right? There was this guy, HN, a lefty guy that was on the chat.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, here's Destiny's post where he's saying based, where he's retweeting people saying like, you have until February 12th if you own a Tesla and then we're coming after you. And Destiny's like, based. And Destiny said that he wishes that the worst thing could happen was that bullet not killing Trump, and that all Trump supporters are fuck around, find out if they get shot. Oh, you know, all the shit, you know, he said. That's all written off as, that's jokey, that's jokes, that's it. But Destiny also says Trump saying fight like hell is clearly a call to violence.
Yep.
So the way that they, like, and a good way to look at it is your words are violence, their violence is speech. That's how they look at it. And so they'll say, like, you saw this on CNN. They were like, you know, these Teslas being vandalized, or Tesla, you know, dealerships being vandalized and destroyed. They're like, well, that's free speech. That's protesting. No, that's not. You can't destroy property.
Right.
You can't use intimidation. That's not just protest. And it was the same, you remember, when the Dobbs decision got leaked. And like the law is very specific that you can't protest outside jurist or judges' homes during an ongoing case. Yeah, they're the FBI, allowed it to occur. All of these people outside Kavanaugh's house, where his family lives, right? And then there's an assassination attempt on Kavanaugh. And what was their response? Oh, the assassination attempt wasn't even that serious. It wasn't even that serious, you know, and it was like, the guy ended up, they got him before he, like, actually did anything. So, you know, it wasn't that big of a deal. And you know, that's just, we have a rich tradition of free speech in this country. But Trump saying fight like hell is not free speech. That's, oh my God, that's going too far.
Imagine if that stuff happened to Kamala Harris.
Oh my!
We would not hear the end of it.
Or how about when it happened to? How about Ruth Bader Ginsburg? If it happened to Ruth,
Yeah.
Can you imagine the insanity? There would have been a 1 million-person march on Washington if it happened to RBG, an assassination attempt over like abortion.
Right.
But when it happened, or how about just the smears on Kavanaugh in general? That he was a serial, gang assaulter and all of this shit. I mean, it really is like the double standards are incredible. Now, I will agree with one thing Vaush said there. The people that were making fun of Nancy Pelosi's husband being attacked, I wasn't a fan of that. I wasn't. Now, the reason they were making fun is they weren't saying that it was political. They thought that this was a lover of him that it turned awry. And it very may well have been. But I don't care. Someone being beaten with a hammer is not funny to me. And so
but there's also a difference. There's a difference between thinking something's funny, which saying that's funny is not correct. It's not right. But there's a difference between that and then like calling for people to do that to them. That's the difference.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. That's absolutely right. And that's why I even when the whole assassination attempt thing was going, I even said about Destiny with like the jokes about that firefighter that died. Well, as bad as that is, it's not calling for the firefighter to be killed. It's just saying, haha, I'm joking about it. And I would be a hypocrite because for me, I like dark comedy. And I remember after 9/11, there was this comedian I like, Gilbert Godfrey. Yeah. And he did this roast and he stands up at the roast. And the first thing he says is like, and this is like a week or two after 9/11. He says something to the effect of like, yeah, I would have been here a little sooner, but my plane took a detour around and like the crowd starts groaning. And then he tells this famous joke called The Aristocrats. There's a whole documentary on this joke called The Aristocrats. Basically, without telling the joke, because it's probably too vile to tell on YouTube without getting in trouble, the joke is a family goes to a talent agent, and they're like, hey, we have an act we want to show you. And then this mother, father, daughter, and son and dog engage in the most vile, grotesque sex acts that you could imagine. And the joke is you're supposed to make it as detailed as possible and drag the joke out for as long as possible. And then finally, at the end of it, they finish, and the talent agent says, oh, my God, what do you call this act? And they say, The Aristocrats. And the joke is, oh, it's this fancy sounding name, but they did all this gross stuff. The joke is how stupid the joke is, basically. So Gilbert Godfrey tells that joke after he does the 9/11 joke. The point Gilbert Godfrey was making without making it was, hey, when we have a tragedy, we have to be able to get over it. And one of the ways to get over it was with humor. And I think there's a lot of truth to that. That's how I operate in my life. My dog passed away. It was a serious moment for me. And on the way home from the vet where the dog got put down, me and my wife were joking about dumb shit that the dog did in the past. That's one of the ways that we're getting over it. It's not for everyone. I understand how some people could be offended by it. So I let that shit slide with Destiny. Okay. But when Pisco asks you directly, did you want that bullet to kill Trump? And you're like, I don't know what I could say because of terms of Fed posting. And, well, the worst thing that could happen was him not hitting him with the bullet. That's pretty unambiguous. Right. When people are calling for attacking Tesla owners and you're like, yeah, good, based, that's pretty unambiguous. That's different than laughing about some tragedy that occurred. So you're absolutely right about that. Real quick, I get a couple super chats. Brian's 2 cents. Thanks for being a member for 1 month. Says, I want to see you box Destiny. That would be something. I don't know. He would have to have consent for me to box.
You couldn't mess up his jaw.
Yeah, that's right. I don't know that he would give consent to box. He's not good on that stuff. Jack the Guitar God for $20. Thank you so much, man. Says, here's some support. Payday, baby. I'd rather give this to you than buy a cheeseburger, and I really like cheeseburger. Well, thank you. Beating out cheeseburgers, no joke, man. I'll take that all day.
Real quick, I was wondering what you think about just this statement. So I hear people say, they dislike Trump because of either what he says or how he says it. But if you bring up, particular policies that are, common sense, that just make complete sense, they say, yeah, I agree with policy. I agree with this policy. I just don't like how he speaks. Mm-hmm. Isn't that the same logic to saying something like, well, I don't agree with German mustache man's policy, but I like how he speaks? Isn't that the same, right?
Yeah, there's this weird phenomenon. It's just that oftentimes, like it's almost like there's cognitive dissonance in these people and they've just been preconditioned to hate him. So it's like, well, we just hate him, you know? But there is more to it than that. Like, I'll be honest. Bill Clinton seemed like a cool guy. All right, take the sexual assault allegations out of it. Like, other than that, Bill Clinton seemed like the type of guy. I think he's from Arkansas. He seems like the type of dude that if you were having a party at your house, he'd show up and be like, crack me one of those cold ones. Where's the burgers at? Let's go get some barbecue fired up here. Like, that seems like
that's
like
almost your Brianna Wu impression.
It's close. Everyone's the same. Yeah, I just got one impression. And it seemed like you could sit down. Like, one of my favorite comedy bits is when Norm Macdonald, maybe 97, was the speaker at the White House press correspondence dinner. And it's like Norm's, you know, some of it's light, but other of it, he's really going after the Democrats and Bill Clinton. And Clinton's laughing his ass off. He's sitting there having a great time. You know, I understand why Trump rubs people the wrong way. If Trump wasn't president and he was just Trump and I didn't know who he was, and all of a sudden, you know, back when I used to bartend, he walks in and he starts being like an arrogant prick, I'd probably be like, fuck this guy. Like, who is this asshole, you know? But the truth is, in politics, it's like, I actually like Trump's personality for politics because it's refreshing to see someone who's transparently themselves. Everyone puts this mask on. Everyone's playing the character that they think. Everyone's Hillary Clinton, where she goes to the, you know, black podcaster and she's like, I keep hot sauce in my purse. Or Kamala Harris, where all of a sudden she puts on the black Southern drawl, you know, when it's like, it's so transparently bullshit. And even when I ran for office, you know, I ran in a special election for Congress, and I remember the first event I did was in Potter County, a smaller county. It was excellent. It was my favorite event we did, because the way this worked was it was you had conferees that were the only ones casting votes because it was a special election. So it wasn't like a primary where everyone gets to vote. And so you would show up to each county and talk to the conferees, and you're basically vying for 200 votes. That's what was going on. And the first event was the only one where everyone was in the room together the entire time. Most of the time, it would be one candidate would walk in and talk to all the conferees, then they'd leave the room, then the next candidate walks in. So the first event I really liked, and no one knew me, and I got to talking about, you know, where my political beliefs come from and what I think. And I was like, you know, I'm a big Freedom Caucus guy and small government, blah, blah, blah. The next event I go to, one of the candidates that got to know me comes up to me and he goes, what are you going to say about the Freedom Caucus? It was in Center County. And I was like, I don't know, I'm going to say I like them. Same thing I said before. And he's like, well, don't do that. And I was like, why? And he's like, because Center County, this is going to be, we're really getting into the weeds now here, but Center County in Pennsylvania, it's split down the middle in what district it is. One district is the district that I was running for. The other district, the representative is a man by the name of Glenn Thompson, who happens to be my representative. He is the longest serving Republican in Congress in Pennsylvania. So Center County loves him. And apparently Glenn doesn't like the Freedom Caucus. So the rumor was Glenn told the people, the conferees, first question you ask is, do you support the Freedom Caucus? And if they say yes, then you don't vote for them. So what do you think the first question they asked me was? Do you support the Freedom Caucus? And I said, yes, I do. I mean, because to me, my job as a candidate is to be as open and honest as I can. And your job as a voter is to try to learn about the candidates and make the best possible decision for you. And so I'm not going to put on this mask. It was the same with term limits. Term limits in Potter County were huge. Everyone was like, yes, term limits, term limits. But then in Center County, they don't want term limits because their representative, Glenn Thompson, well, would be out if there were term limits, and they like him. They don't want him gone. And so it's like to watch these politicians just at this level, just people I'm going up against, try to thread this needle. Oh, well, we're for term limits here, but not really when we're in the next county. It just makes me laugh. I'm like, okay. Like, all I know to a fault is be myself. Now, that doesn't mean that you don't slightly change. When you're in church, you're not, you know, telling cock and balls jokes or something, but you get the point.
Not every time.
Right. It depends on the church. But, you know, that's, and so Trump, to me, it's like, he is who he is. Like, it's sort of refreshing. Right? So, it's like, oh, okay.
Yeah, it's kind of funny because like I don't like some of the stuff he says, but I like that he says it, even though I don't like what he says, because
Yeah,
I know that it's genuine. But what's interesting though, I've noticed, I don't know if you've noticed this, but leading up to the election, you know, they called him a Nazi over and over and over. I don't hear them saying that anymore. I hear them saying he's a liar now. And I just thought about it when we were talking, and I know they've said he's a liar before, but they're like, from what I've heard, really ramping up on it. And I think maybe that's because now this is supposed to be like, quote unquote, the most transparent administration ever. And I'm wondering if that's why they call him a liar over and over now.
Well, I think that they've been calling him a liar in the past too. Like this is particularly like, you remember you had all the Washington Post fact checkers and stuff. Trump said he told more lies than any president in history. And then you would look at the fact checkers and be like, okay, let's see the lies. He said no one respects women more than him. It's like,
yes, exactly.
Okay, yeah, I guess that's a lie. And then the next one would be like, he said that, he had one of the fastest quarters of growth of any president. Well, that's technically true. It wasn't his policies. It was blah, blah, blah. So in other words, yes, he told the truth, but they're going to call it a lie anyways because they disagree for the reasoning that something that this stuff happened all the time. Then, of course, famously, when Biden came in, the most prominent fact checker, I forget his name, I'm not even going to say it because I could be wrong. Maybe it was John Hardwood, but I think I'm wrong about that. Was like, oh, I get to take some time off because Biden doesn't lie. And it's like, you remember when Biden, like,
he said he was going to cure cancer.
Yeah. How about in the 80s when he had to stop running because he plagiarized and lied about, one of these speeches? Like, yeah, Biden, every other word that comes out. Like, now some of the lies, who really gives a shit? Like, his infamous story about beating up the nefarious gangster Corn Pop. It's like, okay, it's fucking ridiculous. It points to the ridiculous. But at the end of the day, if Joe Biden's not lying about policy and he's embellishing like his past, I guess I don't give a shit. It's like, it's stupid, but whatever. But like, compare that to like you're not, they would call out every one of Trump's lies. Trump said it was the biggest crowd ever, but it was only the third biggest crowd. Okay.
Yep.
Like
I know, dude. The one thing that pisses me off more than anything is, and I hear it all the time, is that Trump lied because he said he was going to end the Russia-Ukraine war on day 1. It's going to be day 50. It's like, you know what's worse? War. Like I just, it's so.
Well, there's different types of lies, and we all understand that, right?
Right.
We get it. I don't think. Look, in a perfect world. Would no one ever lie ever? Yes, of course, in a perfect world. I would like politicians that would be able to run on something and say this. Listen, I have a plan. My plan's going to be that we're going to cut government spending. And the truth is that there will be some short-term pain because of that. That could be 3 to 6 months because the spending's artificially propping up things like the stock market. And there's a lot of people that are being paid to do things that aren't really productive to the whole country. So there will be some transition pains. But after that 6 months, what we anticipate is manufacturing is going to start to come back. We're going to start to see those people that were in those sectors transition to more productive sectors. And it's going to make our economy healthier overall. Like, yeah, that's what I would like to see. But if the opponent's saying, day 1, greatest economy ever, it's going to be the best. The truth is, so many voters are low information enough that they're going to be like, wow, I'm not going to vote for the guy that's basically promising me that life's going to suck for 6 months. Right. I'm not going to vote for that. And so what happens, politics becomes this game of basically carnival barkers where it's like people are like, no, trust me, it's going to be the greatest. And we're going to lower taxes. We're going to increase government programs. We're going to that's what all politicians do.
They always do that.
All of them.
Yeah.
And it's just with Trump sometimes makes his claims a little more braggadocious. We'll end the war on day 1 as opposed to say the war will be ended almost immediately when we get in. We'll take steps down. It's like, if you're going to be like, oh, well, we take him literal. He said day 1 and it wasn't day 1. Okay, Biden said he was going to cure cancer. Did you take that literally?
Exactly. Yep.
Oh, no, that was different. Well, he tried. And it's like, that's the shit that people get fired up about. And like, the truth is the average person sees through that. So like when you see people like all these lefties that I deal with that day 1, like January 21st, are like, egg prices, look how high the egg prices are. The average person sees through that. It's like, what the fuck are you talking about? This dude's been in office 1 day. Yeah. You all didn't say shit about egg prices for 4 years under Joe Biden as they went up every month. You didn't say shit. But now, because Biden's policy killed millions of chickens, day one Trump gets in, and you're going to be like, egg prices, but he promised day one the economy would be better. Oh, he lied. He lied. Most people see through it. It's like, yeah, okay, go fuck yourself. You know,
Yeah.
it's just like we get it. You know, it's like, imagine like, oh, this basketball player said he'd be the greatest ever. Oh, he was only the third greatest. Kobe never surpassed Jordan, so he's a big liar. There.
Yeah.
Oh, what an asshole. What a big liar. It's like, dude, you people are like, you're not serious.
Yeah.
Lies that matter are like, if you like your doctor, you could keep it. There's a fucking lie that mattered.
And
Or
lie,
Trump said
lie,
Nazis were good people.
Yeah.
There's a lie that mattered.
a lie also assumes that you're intentionally hiding the truth. And some of the stuff you can't even know, like with the whole like, tariff thing, for example, it's like, well, even if like, I don't know, it assumes that you already know the truth. And that's not always the case as well. But the funny thing is like on day one, these people are saying, well, why isn't the economy fixed? Well, the day before they said the economy was good. It's like, what are you talking about? You just said it was good yesterday. Now all of a sudden it needs to be fixed.
Yeah, right. Egg prices, right, were the most important thing. Now egg prices are going down. You're not hearing any of them talk about egg prices. It's just, and then if egg prices go back up next week, which, by the way, newsflash, egg prices are going to increase. You want to know how I know that? Because the demand's about to increase. Do you know why?
Because people don't have eggs.
Easter.
Oh, yeah, true.
But the demand for eggs always goes up during Easter. So you'll see an uptick in egg prices. Now, it might only be short, but that'll happen. And all of the people that yelled egg prices, and are now silent today are going to be like, oh, people like Rob talked about egg prices last week, but now where are they? That's what they're going to do. I guarantee it.
The best one that I heard, I just saw the headline, to be honest. I want to say it was a CBS article, but it said some expert says that actually the lower gas prices, it's a bad sign for the economy. I have never heard that before. That's a first for me.
Oh, inflation wasn't happening, and then it was, well, okay, it's happening, but it's a good thing. And there were all these articles
Right.
that people were writing, like, it was like, well, maybe Americans are too greedy, Hey, Ben, someone wants to jump in, I think, so I put a link there. But, hey, I really appreciate the call. I really did.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me. See ya.
All right. We'll talk soon. See you. As we're waiting for Joseph to come in, I did want to show you this. I talk about this a lot, but I like to brag about how right I've been for things so long. Here's what I was writing about the dossier. This is me. My name was Grambler. Let's see if I can switch this to dark mode. More presentable. No? Whatever. This website's gone to pot. But this is me writing here. Let's read this first. Thank you, ZT Den, for $5. Thank you, man. Says, thank you to whoever gifted subscription to Rob's channel yesterday. I'm grateful. Thank you to all who helped keep Rob's voice alone. Thank you, Rob. Thank you. I really appreciate it. That was probably Jess Gerald that donated. He's always donating like 50 at a time. He's excellent dude. So thank you. I'm glad you got a membership. I write, there are a lot of troubling allegations about this past election. Again, I'm writing this October 26, 2017 at 8:27 a.m. How about that? A lot of troubling allegations this past election and the period before them, although no doubt Russian influence is important, I contend that we're seeing far more serious threat that the scandal play out. The scandal's as follows. If, and that's a big if, this dossier that we now know was paid for by Hillary's team was used by the Obama administration to obtain FISA warrants against Trump's team, it's the biggest political scandal I could ever recall in the United States. I understand that all sides do opposition research and that occasionally that could be used for an investigation, but I want to highlight the reasons I think this situation is much more serious. It's a very credible threat to our political system. One, probably the least important, it proves the hypocrisy of the Democrats and the media, not all of them, but most, that were hysterical about Russia collusion, particularly with the Don Jr. fiasco. I won't spend too much time on this, but look at what some of these people were saying about Don Jr. Things like trying to use information from Russians to undermine their opponent was committing treason. Now all of a sudden they're silent and deflecting. Right, now that we know that Democrats use dirt from Russians. But again, that's far and away the least impactful thing. Second, Hillary's team lying about funding. It's still not catastrophic, but this is sort of issue that makes the next few issues magnified. Given the importance of the dossier itself and the Russian investigation in general, people, especially Congress, should have been informed of who paid for this material. In fact, Fusion GPS and others refusing to disclose this info, which may be the right, makes it worse. Why were they hiding this? It seems like they knew they were paying foreign sources who were getting dirt from Russian agents who would hurt their narrative, and so they lied. It really calls into question just how serious these people are about reading out Russian influence. Third, due to the fact that that relied on Kremlin-connected sources, this dossier could have actually been the most direct way for Russia to influence the U.S. Remember, most investigators admit that less than wanting a particular side to win, Russia just wanted to muck up the whole system and cause problems. All they had to do was give Hillary team paid Steele some salacious material, and lo and behold, the government of this country is grinded to a halt, and the division is higher than ever. 4, now we start getting to the huge problems. If this dossier was used to obtain FISA warrants, it's one of the most corrupt things I've ever seen in this country. People mentioned how all sides, including Trump's, pay groups for opposition research, and how sometimes it could lead to an investigation. I agree with this. But those investigations are at least known to the public. For example, a possible Uranium One deal investigation, which we still have never received. Everyone knows this is going to happen, so I was wrong about that. Now imagine instead of this being made public, the info was given to Trump, who then got FISA warrants and surveyed his political opponents without their knowledge. It would be an outrage. Let's look at all the ways this is disgusting. First, the dossier has disgusting allegations that have nothing to do with crimes. The peace story was written in a very amateur way and has parts that can be proven false in a very short period of time, like Michael Cohen meeting in Prague. For this to then be used to survey political opponents' campaign for president is insane. The threshold for something like this has to be immensely high, or else every single president can utilize the intel community against their opponent. Next is the fact that it's incredibly bad as it is getting secret warrants to survey his opponent would be. Obama then went out of his way to make sure that this info was shared with as many intel agencies as possible, which all but assured leaks to the press. A situation like this involving a candidate for president is so serious that it should be kept as tight-lipped as possible, but Obama did the opposite. Obama also told European allies that Trump may have shady connections to the Kremlin, thereby jeopardizing relationships with these countries in the event that Trump won. All of this is unique and the most authoritarian election-influencing action I have ever heard of. The precedent has now been set for sitting president's party to pay foreign agents to go to countries that we are rivals or enemies with, to get any kind of poorly written or scandalous info from that country's agents about the other party's candidate, then without the other party knowing it, getting FISA warrants to investigate and survey them with the FBI, spread that info far and wide, and make sure it gets leaked to the press and even tell allies about it. In effect, this makes the FBI a tool for a sitting party to act as its own opposition research team, a team that could violate your rights and arrest you. It is the most Orwellian thing imaginable and should be rejected in the strongest possible terms, and all of those responsible need to be held accountable. 5th, then there's the matter of the FBI itself. They were going to pay Steele to continue this research, which is unbelievable. Not only was the material Steele gave them scandalous, written poorly, and easily proven wrong in some parts, but then they decide they want more. Think about this. The FBI has to know, given the fact that this info could literally dictate who wins the presidency and possibly prove Russia trying to subvert that election, that they had to know this is one of the most serious and difficult cases they would deal with. So they hire a foreign agent who is paid for by one of the candidates' team to go to Russia and use Russian sources to get more dirt. That's outrageous. But it doesn't stop there. Now the FBI is stonewalling congressional subpoenas to testify as to this situation, and most importantly as to whether the dossier was used to get warrants. Every single American should be livid over this. This reeks of the FBI being a political tool, not to mention all of the leaks that were coming out of the FBI in the first place. It seems as if the FBI was basically acting as its own entity that is not accountable to the people. We're talking about one of the most powerful agencies in the world with the power to look at anyone's life at a whim, possibly favoring one political party and having no accountability to the people whatsoever. It's a nightmare. Remember when Schumer said the intel community could get back at people that anger them? And then this is just one issue, though a large one, and a bunch of very questionable issues involving the FBI recently. Due to all those reasons, I believe that if, and that's a big if, this dossier was used to get FISA warrants, this is the biggest scandal I've ever seen and the biggest threat to our system that I've ever seen. People are worried about Russia influencing our system, which they have every right to be, but that pales in comparison to how dangerous it would be to have the sitting party weaponize the FBI against political opponents. I wrote that in October 26th, 2017. And if you want a link to that, I'll put it here. Now, you could go through that thread and you could see how the people, oh, this is bullshit. The FBI would never use warrants like that. And then later, once it comes out, they did. Well, but they verified all the information before they used it. So it's not that bad. And then once, well, okay, they didn't have time to verify, but of course they couldn't verify. That's why they had an investigation. It's absurd. And no one gives a shit that happened. It's like, well, it was a long time ago. Anyways, I just wanted to bring it up. Brock Van Wagner, thanks for the 10 gifted memberships. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much. All right. Rome, what's happening? Thanks for jumping on the call. Appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, you probably recognize me by now.
Yeah, we've talked before.
It's your favorite Ukraine stan.
Yeah.
But so I'm looking at things here. It looks like Putin just agreed to a ceasefire. I'm glad Ukraine came to the table on that. I made me pretty happy that they were willing to do that. I'm
Wait,
more curious.
Where are you seeing that?
I saw it on X last night. I was on a trip with my wife and kids. We took them out to the movies and went for dinner at Chick-fil-A at the Play Place. And I was scrolling X and saw it.
I'm unaware of
Putin had
that, but
sent
that's
a list
good news.
to the White House of things that if Trump did, they would accept a ceasefire. They haven't said what's on the list yet. So
Okay, well, I saw that basically they were like, we will agree if certain things are met, but those things
I guess that's kind of what I was saying, but I can't. I assume it's not going to be any too wild, right?
From what I was seeing, basically what they were calling for is no NATO expansion. Ukraine can't be in NATO. Russia gets to keep many of the areas that they have, and possible like demilitarization of Ukraine.
I saw that too, but the place I saw that from was like a Russian ministry official talking to a news org. It wasn't
right. So I don't know. Like, to me, the entire point was Trump had a 3-step process, as you know. Just so you know, your kids in the background, I don't care, but there are fucking freaks that watch me. So I just wanted to. I personally don't care. I'm just letting you know, though.
I'll turn my mic 45 degrees to the left, and it won't pick anything up from that side of the room anymore.
Okay, just as long as you're cool with that. Okay.
Yeah,
It's all right. I don't mind. I just meant visually, because you never know what kind of weirdos are watching. So my channel, hopefully it's all right, though I got a lot of hate watchers. Anyways, 3-step plan was: 1, have an excuse for the United States to have economic relationships in the region. So the minerals deal. Right. Then Trump would be able to say, look, the American people, we're getting something out of this. We could keep working with Ukraine and we can have people there. 2nd was an immediate ceasefire. And then 3rd is hammering out the deals of a long-term peace plan. So the ceasefire portion of it, I think, is very important. We need to stop before we could sit down at the table and have a serious conversation. That's difficult to do while literally bombs are still flying on both ends. So we need this ceasefire. So I think that's why Trump was taken aback by Zelensky criticizing the second part of that plan. Well, we wouldn't trust any ceasefire and we're not going to do it and blah, 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 which is why he was so hard on Zelensky, because it's like, dude, that's a precursor to being able to negotiate for a long-term deal. We need to stop the bombs flying now. So I hope that Russia agrees to that. I hope that that's something that they're willing to come down. The difficult part's obviously going to be it's easy to say, okay, 30-day ceasefire. It's difficult to hammer out a long-term deal. So that's obviously going to be the hardest part of it.
I guess what I'm wondering is, like, so Ukraine hopefully is finally ready to actually seriously talk about peace, right?
Mm-hmm.
But what if Russia's not? Right.
Well, it's interesting, right? Like, what if neither side isn't? What if Zelensky's just saying it now? The truth is, both there are agreements.
I think so that Zelensky has to. Trump wasn't. Wow. So I disagree with the blow up. I think they could have swallowed it and been nicer. I understand why people are mad, but still, Trump wasn't wrong when he told Zelensky, "You don't have leverage without us." He wasn't wrong when he said that, and he wasn't wrong to say that. So I think Zelensky's in a spot where he's forced to play ball, because even his own people in his parliament started calling for his impeachment after that happened.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and
well,
he doesn't have a choice now. So I don't.
Here's what I'll say. That's true. But does Zelensky really want peace, or is he forced into that because of his situation? I don't know. Right. This is what I would say. Both. I don't think Zelensky and Putin are monsters to the point where it's like we're just in it for, like, you know, like the Joker and Batman. It's just like, I just want to see the world burn. I don't think that's either of them.
Kidnap more children.
Given that, I think that both of them would be willing to end the conflict, but under certain conditions. Zelensky might want Russia, as he said in the past, Russia to completely leave the country, Russia to pay trillions of dollars for all the damage they've caused, whatever. Clearly, that's not going to happen because they're approaching it from a position of weakness. Russia's winning the conflict, so that's not going to happen. But are they willing at this point to admit, like, look, we're ready to talk peace because we've talked to the United... I think probably what's happened was Trump saying, okay, we're going to withhold intel, and we're not going to send you any more military aid. I think that was the note to Zelensky, like, dude, you got to go to the peace table because we're not going to fund this forever. And if we don't fund it, I don't know if it was you, I can't remember specifically, but I had people telling me, oh, no, trust me, Europe will just step in and they're going to fund it even more.
No, that wasn't me. I never believed Europe would do that. They have no balls anymore.
That's right.
They
That's
can't
not
even
gonna
stop immigration into their own country. How are they
They-
going to stop an invasion?
Right. And they not only do they not have the will, they don't have the ability, even if they had the will. Like, their militaries are depleted. Like, they just can't do it. And so I think the final straw was Trump setting off intel and leaving Zelensky see just how naked he'll be. It's like, there is no other savior coming for you. So if we're saying it's time for a ceasefire and a peace talk, you're going to have to say, okay. So in that sense, I think you're right. Zelensky's ready because he's been pushing that. Well, what if Putin's not? Well, Putin's ready for a peace deal. It's just, what are the terms, right? If they walk in and they say, for example, Trump says, look, so here's the deal. We're going to start with this. Ukraine's joining NATO. Then no, Russia's not ready for peace. They're going to be like, no, that's no good. We're going to keep attacking. I think that what's been happening is Trump's been trying to set this up behind the scenes by kind of, I don't want to say talking up, but not talking shit on Putin.
Yeah.
And being like, well, he's a smart guy. And then remember, there was this like scuttlebutt about Trump had reached out to Putin about an aluminum trade deal. Trump's plan is basically, if we're trading with everyone in the region, then there won't be conflict. So he's trying to tell Ukraine, hey, we're going to do this mineral deals. We'll have an excuse to be there. Then he's trying to tell Russia, look, we're going to have this very profitable metals deal. So you don't want to ruin that. It'll be more profitable for you to not go back into Ukraine than otherwise. We'll see if it works. I mean, the problem's going to be, the devil's going to be in the details. Hopefully the ceasefire happens for 30 days. From the perspective of Russia, though, you could say, well, we think we're winning right now. We just had big victories in Kursk. 30 days gives Ukraine a chance to get back into the field. Are we willing to accept that? I hope for the sake of peace they are, and that there's serious negotiations. And I'll say this real quick, and then I'll leave you jump in. A serious negotiation means Ukraine's going to have to give up some shit because they're losing. And so I hope that it's not just a joke that like Ukraine goes in there and it's like Russia's going to pay for everything. Russia's going to leave the whole region, blah, 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 because that's going to be a non-starter. And Russia's going to say, no, we'll just continue the war then.
Okay. Yeah. I know they pushed them back in Kursk, but in return, Ukraine pushed them out of parts of Donetsk and Luhansk again. Right?
We'll
it's
see.
not like
They're losing.
They're losing,
right.
But my point is they're not losing hard, which is why the war has gone on so long, is because it's not been a rollover. So the Ukrainians, because they're the ones being invaded, their people's will is much higher than the Russians. Their soldiers' morale is much higher than the Russians, because the Russian soldiers are also being conscripted. Like, you see the videos on Twitter of Ukrainian vans pulling up and grab people. Russians are doing the same thing, but the ones they're doing it to aren't even fighting for their country. They're fighting to take some random land that they're never going to go back to again.
Yeah, but
like them personally.
But even I hear this on both ends of it. I do. I don't know how many people have died on each side. The numbers are wildly disparate. On one hand, I hear that like 4 times more Russians have died than Ukrainians. Douglas McGregor was on Tucker's show the other day saying that it's 10 times more Ukrainians than died than Russians. I think that's laughable. My guess would probably be close to 2 to 1 for every Ukrainian that's died, probably 2 Russians. That's sort of my guess. It just seems to make sense when one country's fighting a defensive war and the other one's advancing. It seems that that's likely what's occurring, but I don't know. The truth is the propaganda is so thick on both sides, it's hard to get a measure of exactly what's going. I could listen to one person tell me, I could go to a YouTube channel right now and listen to a person tell me and truly believe, dude, Ukraine is kicking ass. They're advancing, all of these victories. It's only a matter of time before Ukraine wins. And then literally switch over to another channel with someone that will be like, it's over. Russia just had an incredible victory. Ukraine's done, right? So it's hard for me to piece out exactly what's going. I do know this, though, that ultimately Ukraine's losing. And the fact that the United States is making it clear to them, we're not going to fund this forever. It doesn't matter if the Ukrainian troops' morale is higher than Russian troops, because if the United States decides to back out, that's the end of the game. And the United States is making it clear, we're done. We're not going to keep doing this long term, unless if Russia's so unreasonable in peace negotiations, then maybe Trump decides, okay, we'll keep funding Ukraine. I hope that's not the case. So I think that given that, no matter what the reality is on the ground today, if we both agree that the reality is Trump's telling Zelensky, look, we're not going to fund this forever, when that funding ends, Ukraine is done. And so Ukraine is negotiating from a position of weakness because of that.
Well, that's why they want us involved, and that's why the minerals deal was so important for them, because now we'd have an interest in the region. They decided not to do that. Looks like they might now. They might go back.
Well, they putzed it around. Zelensky screwed it up. He putzed it around, and what can you do? Hey,
another thing I want to say is when you go to you got to
yeah, just Brock Van Wegger, thanks for the 10 memberships as always, man. Thank you so much. And I had one more. Let me scroll down to here. Max Reddick again, thanks for the $2. Says I should call up Pac-Man or Cedar to debate. I would love to debate Pac-Man.
Those would be good debates, but Cedar's a moron, dude. Did you see his Jubilee?
Yeah,
that's off topic.
Yeah.
I do want to say, like, two things are possible at once, right? As Ben Shapiro loves to say, Ukraine is kicking Russia's ass. It doesn't mean they're not losing, right? Because Russia's army is, 3 or 4 times bigger?
Yeah.
And the numbers that I've seen that I trust are about 3-1. And this is mostly from, like, the people that sit on the sides. They look at the satellite imagery. They see, this troop transport was destroyed. It contains this many people on average. Those people, we don't see them leaving. They're probably all dead. And so over years of doing like this kind of thing, they estimate these kind of things. So I haven't used the Ukrainian or the Russian numbers just because both sides are going to want to like play up their whatever.
Right.
So it's pointless.
We're doing great. The other side's doing terrible. They're both going to do that, of course.
But so I stick with like the people sitting on the satellites looking down, and
but even then,
they'll be wrong too.
Everyone has a bias, and I think certainly some people have more educated guesses than like me, right? So by no means am I saying that what I'm anticipating is I think that for me, we'll see if you agree with this. I think Russians have lost more. I think to me that's reasonable. When I hear Douglas McGregor say that Ukrainians have lost 10 times more than Russians, I don't believe that. I think that's a bit outlandish. I could be wrong. I mean, there's a hypothetical situation, but I'm operating under the assumption that's not true, that Russians have lost more. What magnitude of more? 2 times more, 3 times more? I don't know. But Russia's gaining shit from this too. They're gaining sort of cohesion from relationships that they're having with BRICS countries. They're gaining,
North Korea, with
even though they're losing troops, they're certainly gaining information and expertise on fighting a war. One of the things that's amazing that none of us think about, like when we think about, and I think this is true, you could criticize Russia for this. We sort of still think about like all of these armies at their like peak, like World War II. Or like so we think of like the Russian army as these are these badasses that were fighting but what's the big war that they've fought? Yeah, they've had insurgents, right? Like with the Mujahideen, Chechnya, all of that stuff. But have they fought like a prolonged war like this? No. But who has? Has the United States?
No one, pretty much.
Right.
United States and Vietnam, I guess.
Right, but since then, it's like, and even though those wars...
I don't think Yugoslavia counts.
What does a war between the United States and Russia look like? What does a war between the United States and China look like?
I don't think it's a contest, personally.
Well,
I think if we just gave our Air Force to Ukraine, Ukraine wins in like a month.
Okay, but the point I'm trying to make is I'm not asking who will win or not. I'm saying none of us in our lifetime have seen anything like it. Like our military at this point isn't used to fighting other militaries with similar capabilities. We're used to fighting militaries, and I saw some people talk about this, some U.S. soldiers that fought in Afghanistan. And then early in this war, they went over and were fighting for Ukraine. And they were like, we have never experienced a conflict where we didn't have the technological superiority, like air cover and shit. Like, we're so used to fighting like Al-Qaeda.
There's a reason for that.
Well,
I don't think anybody has close. Maybe China, but
no. I agree. But what I'm saying is it illustrates that our militaries aren't these well-oiled machines that are used to fighting these types of war. They're not. And Russia now is. Russia, for all of their failures early, like they are getting experience. They're understanding the new types of conflict. They're understanding using drones, what this sort of like modern trench warfare looks like. Now, is it worth it with all the lives they lost? Of course not. I'm just saying it's not as simple as, well, Russia's just losing. No, there are things that Russia's gaining.
Anyone who says that is not being realistic about the situation. Like even people who love Ukraine.
Yeah, I mean, but I mean, ultimately,
and I don't love Ukraine as a country. I just think they are 100% morally correct in this particular war. I understand why Russia. I understand what their casus belli is. NATO's defensive. NATO will never initiate an offensive war against Russia.
That's not true. That's not true at all. It is not true at all.
It is.
Yugoslavia, Libya.
Yeah, we did that in response to the Kosovo Serbs being literally genocided by the other Serbs.
So then, but then it's So then that's all they have to say. Well, Russia is genociding people in Russia.
China's saying that.
Is China genociding?
But also Kosovo.
Wait, Ron.
That whole area was part of NATO.
Wait. Is China genociding the Uyghur Muslims?
Yeah, probably. Well, define genocide. I believe so, but
systemically wiping out a
like
population.
Hassan doesn't think so.
Okay, so then the point is, if you're like, well, NATO would never go in unless they're accusing that country of genocide. You don't think Russia or China will be like, okay, NATO will easily accuse us of genocide?
That situation's more complicated than Russia, though. Like nobody. If you just said, "Hey, Russia's like who? What ethnic groups in Russia is Russia going to genocide? What, the Khazars? No, nobody cares about the Khazars anyway.
It wouldn't have to be specifically genociding a particular religious or ethnic group. They could genocide political opposition.
No,
you don't think Russia would do that?
They would, but nobody would call that genocide. Nobody would invade Russia because they're like.
It could be used as justification nonetheless. It's not like NATO's only.
Okay, so then why did NATO? I don't think you would get enough popular support with a
Why did NATO go into Libya?
I don't remember about Libya. I'll be honest.
Well, maybe you should look that up before you say that NATO's a defensive alliance. We went into a country that, at least by African standards, was a pretty successful country.
Was this related to a terror attack?
No.
I know that's why we went into Iraq.
It was because allegedly Gaddafi was killing his own people.
Oh, was this the chemical weapons or was that?
No, I don't think there was an accusation of chemical weapons.
That must have been in Iraq then.
So it's just laughable.
When
if you're Russia, you would
never
accept it.
You know?
You would never accept it. You would never be like, you're so biased in this. If China gets in a military alliance with Mexico and then puts nuclear weapons 5 miles off the coast of the United States and says, but look, our alliance with Mexico, we've never been aggressive. We've never attacked anyone. The United States would rightfully be like, fuck you. No, you don't get to have those weapons here. And you would agree with that.
Yeah.
You would say, I don't think China.
I don't think we should have those missiles in Turkey. I do think that is a provocation.
Right.
But we're not putting missiles in Ukraine. We're saying you shouldn't violate Ukraine's sovereignty and invade them with this NATO bullshit.
What we're doing. Now, listen, let me be clear. I don't think Russia had the right to invade. I also am cheering for Ukraine to win. So in this war, I think they are on, I guess you could say, the more moral side of it. It's difficult to use those terms for me, but okay. I want Ukraine to win. So I hope that makes it clear, right? Like, Russia shouldn't have invaded. But Russia had reason to invade. It's just, I don't think those reasons are legitimate, right? That enough to cause an invasion. This is true of a lot of actions. Like, if 9/11 happened as we're told, then yes, there is no excuse for that happening. But when Ron Paul says, look, we shouldn't be in the Middle East monkeying stuff up because we're actually creating terrorists that hate us, that's not saying we deserve 9/11. It's saying, screw the scumbags that carried out 9/11, but we should make policies that make it less likely for that outcome to occur, right? That's how I feel with like NATO expansion, stationing missiles in Turkey, biolabs, what we did to Syria, like deposing Assad, which now we're paying fruits with that, aren't we, baby? As Christians are being crucified and their heads blown off, and you get to see it all on X.
That's where I would be okay with just invading someone, to be honest. Okay, when you're genociding Christians, but I'm a Christian, so I'm totally
right.
I would not have the same. Too. I would be very mad if Muslims came in and were like,
right. I agree. But the point I'm trying to make is like, it's not so simple. Like, from your perspective, it's like, yeah, NATO is something that you're like, oh, that's our side. They're the good guys. They're defensive. And it's not that simple. And even if it is that simple, you can understand why the literal country that NATO was formed to go against is going to be like, we don't look at it that way. We don't look at it as just like, oh, if NATO comes right up, if Ukraine becomes a member of NATO and NATO forces are placed in Ukraine and they give them weapons and all this shit, that's perfectly fine because they'll never do anything to us in Russia. That's not true. They're not going to look at it that way. And I understand why not.
Do you want to know the Rome Egypt lore from 2021? What I was advocating for with Russia?
What's that?
I was saying we should invite them to NATO. We should normalize relations and stuff.
Did you see Tucker's interview with Putin?
I watched part of it, but it was a long time ago.
That happened?
I know he talked about the history a lot.
Yeah, it was weird. Putin didn't do himself many favors. But one of the things they talked about, I think, if I remember correctly, it was under Obama. Like, there was conversations with, like, Russia, why don't you join NATO? And Obama was favorable. He says the same thing about George W. Bush. Putin said that both W. Bush and Obama had reasonable conversations with him. The problem was they're not running the show. It's the CIA. It's the people, the bureaucrats.
Hopefully not anymore.
Well, but and so basically Putin was like, yeah, we were like, sure, we'll join NATO. Sounds good. Right. And it's just like, you know, the UN or the World Trade Organizations for trade, you could have a world military alliance. Now, I don't know what the utility of that would be in the grand scheme of things, but it's interesting that you bring that up because basically he was told like, yeah, it sounded good and we were open to it. And then we were basically told like, nah, tough luck.
I didn't buy any of this Russia stuff. The only reason I'm mad at Russia right now is the Ukraine war. If they like, if Russia were to go, hey, to their people, they were like, hey, we did what we did. There's no more Nazis in Ukraine, right? And then they said, and we're gonna give all the land back. We're gonna give back Crimea, and all that stuff, and we got to join NATO. I'd be totally fine for Russia to join NATO.
They're not going to do that. I think
they won't. But
the most likely peaceful resolution is that most of Crimea is going to be given to Russia. That's going to occur. That the map's going to be redrawn. That there will be assurances that Ukraine doesn't join NATO. But there will be some sort of DMZ.
There has to be. Europe has to be involved with long-term security. Ukraine can't rely on Trump. He can't be elected again. At least not right now. We'll see what craziness Republicans get to in the Senate.
Hell, Trump 2028, baby. Yeah. No. But now it's I don't know. I'm cautiously optimistic. The most optimism though for me
careful. The Harris campaign said that.
Yeah.
You say what happened?
We're the party of joy now. So
yeah, it's been redistributed.
Yeah, I think that the most optimism for me comes from the type of people that I see Trump putting in positions that hopefully will take away that old bureaucratic stranglehold on what our foreign policy was. I would like to see a foreign policy that approaches Russia as being more of a adversary, but like a dubious trade partner. I think that would be a relationship that would be better to have. I don't think either the United States or Russia or Ukraine or Europe are going to trust each other in that sense for a long time, rightfully so. But the more sort of trade that we could have, I think that would be a better situation.
It depends. It depends on how much the bureaucracy was involved in keeping relations with Russia sour. My like in our head 40 that Trump is doing this 4D chess move is to try to get the war ended so he can normalize relations with Russia, so he can get some kind of military alliance with Russia against China.
I don't think it'll be military alliance. I think that there will be attempts to an economic alliance that would be to the detriment of China. And I think that even then, I think that he's not interested in a military conflict with China. This dude is a businessman. He wants to crush you through business. That's what he wants to do.
He wants to buy your houses. I want to buy all your houses.
Right. That's it. Good. That's good impression. That's exactly it. So I do think that you're right, though, that like he sees the potential problem with Russia being driven closer economically and militaristically with China.
And that's what this war is doing.
Right. That's exactly right. And so if we could broach by making it more profitable for Russia to be involved with us economically. But part of doing that is Russia can't think that we're looking at them like that Trump's looking at them like he's Sauron, right? And he's just some orc. Like they're going to be like, no, we're not going to do that. And so Trump's trying to on one hand, he has all of these bloodthirsty, no, Russia's the most evil ever. You have to condemn Russia at every possible time back home saying that. And he's trying to placate them by being like, well, but he's also trying to send a signal to Putin like, look, I sort of get why you did what you did. We don't like it. We're against it. But hey, let's leave cooler heads prevail. So, hey, I got to let you go. We got another guest in, but Rome, I always appreciate you calling in to talk conversation. So hopefully we see peace there. I think that'd be great for not just us, but also the people of Russia and especially the people of Ukraine, which I feel terrible for. So thanks, man. Take it easy. All right, Ditzo, I'll get to you 1 second here. Let me read a couple super chats. Ben for $5 says, I like how Russia is somehow weak and losing and also fear-mongering that Russia will be taking Poland in 2030. So you must keep the war going. Yeah, that's been the claims from the outset. On one hand, Russia's about to fall. They're weak. They're a paper bear. And on the other hand, if we don't send everything that Zelensky asked for, they're going to be in Poland and the United States by the end of the year. Ben, again, thank you again, man, for $10. Says, I wish Trump would have been tougher on Kier. Stormer, I believe you mean. I know Trump praises everyone, but Kier is a horrible person and Trump knows he is. UK is a nightmare. Lock up for speech, but okay for people assaulting children. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I get it. Ditzo, what's happening, sir?
Pura vida. How you doing, Rob?
Doing great. Thanks so much for calling in. Appreciate it.
Well, got a lot of things to run through and on the prior conversation. How aware are you on the results that are happening on G7 meeting on Quebec right now?
I assume 0 because that's close to the truth. I'm
Okay.
aware that the meetings are
So-
occurring, but
So as of the last few hours, a final draft has been established. It has not been revealed to publics. My contacts tell me that it's going to be harsh. It is going to be an open criticism against Trump. It is going to be favorable of the ceasefire as long as security assurances are given to Ukraine. Russia is seen as the invader. Russia is seen as the criminal. Russia is seen as the one that should not be given assurances at any form of degree. That's what the G7 is concluding. It is saying that Trump allying himself with Russia clearly shows a sign of weakness from Trump, and that should be ignored. That position will show that the G7 is more inclined in saying, yes, ceasefire has to be done, but not under the terms of Trump. Trump does not have the cards. Trump is fantasizing that a deal with Russia of that nature is effective for any sense, way, shape, form, or manner to continue this relationships. The thing is, look, I'm going to be simple with this. Trump is playing with fire. And he's going to get burned.
yeah, I disagree.
Because you can't trust Putin. You cannot trust him. The relations of Putin and China, for example, especially in the last almost 4 years now since the issue of Ukraine, have fortified. And
Yeah.
Putin is going to play both sides. He's going to
Right.
play
So
an
is Europe.
economic ally with China and with if this
That's
whole Trump
geopolitics. That's what all sides will always do. For example, Europe's doing that. Europe's pro-democracy, right? The G7's pro-democracy, correct?
technically speaking.
How's Romania look right now?
Oh, we know what's happening in Romania.
Right.
We know the situation.
So if you're one of the country that's not in the G7 or the European Union, right? Take Russia, China out of it. Just say that you're a country that's sort of trying to wade through these huge superpowers. On one side, you got Russia, China, and the other side, you have sort of the Western alliance. Trump's sort of a wild card at this point. Like when you hear them saying, well, we're morally correct and we're doing things for democratic reasons, and then you see how they're treating Romania. Like, don't you say the same thing? Well, you're playing with fire if you engage in negotiations with them, because they'll lie right to your face. They may not aggressively, militaristically invade a country that they feel will be able to put up some sort of defense to them. But what they'll do is use color revolutions and use lawfare to go into those countries and get favorable candidates that they like to assure that they win the elections. And they'll even cancel elections and lock up political opposition. So, like, yeah, you're right that there are reasons to be skeptical of Putin. But from what you just said there, I have no doubt that you're probably right. I don't know that we would even need connections to say that the G7 countries are going to conclude that Putin's super evil and Trump's really shitty, right? And instead, what we need to do is continue to do what they've been doing the entire time. But their agenda isn't because they care about democracy or they care about the Ukrainian people. Their agenda is they see one, profitability for people in their favor to make all sorts of money if this war continues to go as a meat grinder as it is. And second, that meat grinder wears down Russia, which they see as geopolitical advantages. That's why they've only provided enough to be a stalemate. And if they think that Trump doesn't have the cards and he should be left out, well, they're fucked. Because if that's the argument, then they're going to have to fill in the gap that the United States is filling in Ukraine, and they can't do it.
So
They
you
are
would
incapable.
agree. So you would agree, and in the example you were talking prior on this conversation, that revolutions and change within an internal country should first and foremost come from the people.
Sure.
Okay.
If that's going to hurt, yeah.
For example, you gave the example of Libya.
Yes.
Are you aware what historically? What was the main tool utilized for the intervention of NATO-led countries on Libya? The no-fly
Sanctions.
zone. Okay,
Right.
but what was the main element that was utilized to then justify the whole process that happened in Libya and the fall of Gaddafi.
If I remember right, wasn't it? There was this speech that Gaddafi gave where he basically was like, "We're going to take out people in this certain city," and then that's what at least Obama used back in the United States to say that's our excuse for why we need to send weapons and stuff to the rebels.
No, the main body that was utilized back in March of 2011 or 2011 was Resolution 1973 of the Security Council. That was actually presented by France, Lebanon, and the United Kingdom, which was voted favorably by Bosnia Herzegovina, Colombia, Gabon, Lebanon, Nigeria, Portugal, South Africa, France, United Kingdom, and the United States. Well, Brazil, Germany, India, China, and Russia abstained from voting on that. That was the main particular justification internationally that led into.
Yeah, but what's that say? You're Googling something and you're reading like what this resolution, the name of it. What did it say? What was the justification that they gave? What did it say that they were then
the
able
main
to do?
justification that led towards then the NATO thing, the NATO intervention was the civil war that was already happening in Libya.
Right.
That you had anti-Gaddafi forces. Gaddafi had been in power for almost 20 years by that time. You had the anti-Gaddafi forces for at least the decade before, putting pressure on Gaddafi, putting pressure on change. Let's just face it on one thing. Gaddafi was a son of a gun, a dictator who needed to be out and
real quick, would you admit that that's probably the case with like 100 countries today?
Oh yeah, dude. If we want to talk about the modern day dictators and in things, hell, I will tell you this: Trump is the United States what Hugo Chavez was to Venezuela. I didn't live through the Venezuela thing. I spoke to you before. I told you that I lived through the second attempted coup that Chavez did in '92 against Carlos Andrés Pérez in Caracas. I was living that. That was one of my main political things that transformed me.
Do I remember the conversation we had? You're working to advocate for marijuana in
drug policy reform.
Yeah, I remember that conversation.
End of the war on drugs, etc. We're still doing.
I remember that conversation. Sorry to interrupt, but it rang a bell.
So, dude, Hugo Chavez, Daniel Ortega. Right now, the situations that are happening with Bukele in El Salvador, Milei is not seen with bright eyes in that aspect. Look, from the end of the war to today, there's no doubt that the issues within internally each country have. Let me put it real simple. Freedom and liberty and independence comes with a risk of being oppressed by the interests of others and the transactional attitude of others, as well as the internal conflicts that happen because of that. So,
right, but you understand the reason I bring up, because I don't know where you're going with this, but when you're talking about Gaddafi, basically the reason that I said is the reason that was used as the excuse for the United States directly getting involved through NATO, right? Yes, there was always this accusation, well, not just an accusation, there was a civil war in Libya. For example, Gaddafi said that civil war was started, it was very small with people that were actually from Libya. Actually, it was a lot of Islamic extremists from outside the country that were being funded. Now, we know that the United States funds those groups like we see them funding them in Syria, where we're working with Al-Qaeda, al-Nusra. In fact, in Benghazi, probably the reason that Benghazi went the way it went was because we were specifically running guns to rebel factions that ended up being Islamic terrorists that were occurring in that region. So when you say, well, Gaddafi was a bad dude and there was this civil war, it sounds like what you're getting to is this. Well, the revolution organically occurred within its own country, and we should support when people are facing oppressive dictators within their own country. But you've already admitted that we could say that with dozens, if not 100 countries in the world today. The problem is that the West picks and chooses which ones they're going to support. And they have the ability to, one, through soft power, things like USAID, etc., have color revolutions and cultural revolutions in countries that sway the opinions and the popular opinions of what that country is doing, which is still outside pressure being exerted. And second, through hard power and through militaristic intervention, give weapons or direct military aid to some of these rebel groups. What happens is we end up geopolitically shifting the direction of these countries in huge ways, and it's selective. The reason that the West was very interested in Gaddafi being overthrown wasn't because of human rights violations. In fact, I believe that there was a UN declaration a year before, if I'm not mistaken, 2009, 2010, that said Gaddafi was doing much better when it came to human rights issues. The reason that he was targeted was because he suggested an African dinar and getting off the dollar as the world reserve currency, that they were going to trade their resources, including energy, based on an African currency. That was the end of Gaddafi. Anyways, regardless of what you think the reason for it was, that revolution against Gaddafi would not have succeeded without NATO's intervention, and the country of Libya is far poorer off today than it was when Gaddafi was there, and no one in the West gives a shit. We went in, we used military intervention. Gaddafi told us exactly what was going to happen, that these weren't noble rebels. They were Islamic extremists. They sodomized him with a bayonet. They paraded him through town. They tortured him. The West laughed about it, and now they're open-air slave markets in Libya. And no one gives a shit. NATO doesn't care. They're not sending troops there.
How do we approach this? I'm going to ask you something. Do you agree? If I say the following, that after the Second World War, one of the goals in international relationships has been the respect of each other's sovereignty, and at the same time, understanding that what happens, and to say it in poetically, if the United States sneezes, Latin America gets a cold. But if Latin America gets a cold, United States can get pneumonia. So in that sense, that respecting each other's sovereignty also means that the good neighbor policy refers to simply assisting when shit hits the fan on your neighbor, because eventually that shit can hit you.
No. I completely disagree with that. Right? Because when you're saying, I think you're actually wrong that post World War II, that it was all about respecting nation sovereignty. It's quite the opposite. Post World War II was, you had two superpowers. You had the Soviet Union and you had the United States. And we're basically going around the world trying to make as many countries, both sides, to be their allies or their puppets. And so that's when the CIA, we started all of these color revolution. Mike Benz talks about this a lot. He calls it the CIA's Department of Dirty Tricks. The problem was we started to realize that there was bad press from having our intel agencies do that. So we formed USAID, which allowed us to fund NGOs that then went into these countries. Now, your argument's basically going to be...
Hold on, can I jump in there? Because
sure.
What I was about to say is, okay, that was the goal or the meta goal that the international community had.
Well,
but in reality,
just real quick, I'll just say real quick, that may be what they said, but that was not the United States and the Soviet Union's goal.
Hold on, exactly. So my second point on that was, we can recognize that that was the goal. That was what we were striving for. But in reality, what happened is what you just explained, where countries like mine got denominated third world countries because we said, fuck you to United States, fuck you to Russia. We don't share this whole dichotomy, false dichotomy BS that you guys are wanting to do. We are our own countries. If we want to implement communism, we're free to do so. If we want to implement capitalism, we are free to do so. But whatever we want to implement, it's our sovereignty. So understanding the concept of the ideal versus the concept of the praxis of what actually has happened in the last almost 80 years since the war, end of the war, we can then establish as follows. Foreign policy, especially from Russia, the United States, and Europe, has been detrimental against the other countries that we're all just trying to survive and do the best we can. That the treatment of backyard treatment of the United States up till today, including this administration, clearly shows to us that no matter who is in power, even today's president in your country, or Putin, or whoever, that we, the rest of the world, that we have to suffer this self-entitlement is getting fed up. It's getting to a point where we have to say, end these empires, finishing them off, and let's reset the geopolitical scenario to a degree where we can all treat equally each other based on our necessities, based on our goals, etc. And at the same time, attend when we have people like Saddam Hussein, Gaddafi, Hugo Chavez, Putin, Xi Jinping, or etc. This type of assholes who want to keep on power for 30, 40, 50 years. And let's attend the issue that does not work. That only is detrimental to freedom and liberty and the possibility of living in a world where we can at least try to cooperate with each other.
Well, I don't disagree. I think, but that to me is more of what Trump represents than what the G7 is. Like the G7 is embracing the old established world order. That's what a lot of the fights back home in the United States with Trump is. If you go back and you look in the impeachment of Trump, the first one, right? You had all these people from the State Department. You had, Vindman and George Kent and all of these other people. And they kept saying over and over again, Trump was going against our foreign policy. And the truth is, the presidents haven't set this for a long time. There was this establishment orthodoxy that was basically ran by unelected bureaucrats and a bunch of other powerful people, and they're shaping the world. Post the Soviet collapse in 92, right? Like, that's the game. The game's the West. The game is the United States, which is basically the militaristic arm of the old established order that you have all of these European countries that are a part of. And they're going to shape all of these smaller countries to ways that are favorable to them. Now, it used to be there was an argument to had in the United States for why that was beneficial. One, because if we don't do it, the Soviets will. And second, because what's good for GM is good for you. So, for example, if we go in and have a color revolution in Venezuela and that opens up the markets of Venezuela to U.S. companies, that in turn makes things better back home because jobs are created by those U.S. companies. I'm not saying that I'm in favor of this, but that was the idea behind it. The problem is now the American people are realizing that their manufacturing and blue-collar work has been gutted. Basically, the United States has become the world's military police, and it's become the world reserve currency. What do we export? We export dollars. That's what we do. And because of that, the middle class in this country has been gutted. Manufacturing's left this country. It's actually a joke now. Like, we have to rely on countries like China when we need simplistic things that we're saying is the fault of China. We need protective equipment from viruses that we are claiming that China created. Actually, it was with the United States help funding it, but nonetheless, well, we have to buy that from China. And if we would enter into a big global war, it would turn out that a lot of the manufacturing that our military relies on is made in China, who's probably the biggest geopolitical enemy of the United States at this point.
I do have to disagree with one thing with you.
Go ahead.
Trump does, from the optics where I'm standing, Trump represents the continuing or the aggravation of a status quo that has no clue,
that's
no
where I was
interest
getting.
In that sense.
That's where I was getting, right? So the point is, the people were fed up with this and they wanted to elect something different. And that's what Trump was. All of that pressure of the intel agencies, everything that you're talking about, the established world order that did all of the terrible things that you're talking about, including, I don't know why you seemingly defended them in Libya with Gaddafi, but including that, where I'm sure if you would talk to a Libyan person, they would have as much ire towards NATO as you do towards what was happening in Venezuela back in the 80s with all the interference with the United States, etc. Right? Like, those people are vehemently against Trump. What Trump's trying to do is saying, I want to look out for America. I don't want to be the world police. I want to have business relationships that benefit America. And the first step, one of the steps to that is our allies in this old world order have taken advantage of us and we're done with that shit. That's why he's so harsh. And then the countries that the former establishment said, oh, these are our enemies that we need to always go against, like Russia, he's saying, let's reset the deck. Let's try to have actual business relationships with them so it benefits everyone, as opposed to having this like neo-Cold War that's been going on ever since the fall of the Soviet Union anyways. And so I completely disagree that I want you to explain to me how. Let me just ask you a yes/no question first. Would you agree that Trump is, at least on paper, a radical departure from the direction the United States had been going?
Yes.
Okay, so then how is it that this one radical departure from the status quo represents continuing the status quo, but all of these countries like in the G7 that haven't had a departure from the status quo that are against Trump, as you said at the open of this, do represent a departure from the status quo that you're criticizing?
Let's start with this. The idea that Trump, even if he's a radical parting, especially in the second administration, from what had been ongoing, especially with the influence of the United States in foreign policy, has to do with several factors. Let's be real. His continuous threats about tariffs and that so obtuse aspect of economy clearly shows to us that his perspective is, I only want advantages for the United States. Fuck the rest of the world. And the rest of the world is telling you, fuck you, we want advantages for us.
Right. You're in Venezuela, right?
No, I'm in Costa Rica.
Okay, you're in Costa Rica.
I can't go to Venezuela because I get a bullet on my head. Long story short.
But Costa Rica, wouldn't you want the elected leaders of Costa Rica to be looking first and foremost out for the people of Costa Rica?
Look, that is precisely why I'm telling you that it's maintaining the status quo.
It's not.
Something new in the sense of geopolitics is as follows. Not new. It has been ongoing, and that north we spoke about has continuously permeated. You can't just observe and think, oh, I'm only looking out for my own people without a relation to what is near you or what it impacts you, because everything is interconnected. Everything functions in interconnection. So when the neighbors are good, you're good. When you're good and the neighbors are good, everybody's good. In that sense, the expression, la normalización, the normalization. Sorry, I have to say it in Spanish so I can translate it to English.
That's fine.
La normalización, the normalization of this idea that we are all separate, and that first and foremost it's us and us and us only. It's 200 years outdated.
But again, I don't disagree with that. Ideally, what you want is a world where each country has leaders that are advocating it first and foremost for the people of their country, but they also understand that usually what's best for your neighbors is also going to be beneficial for your country as well, right? The problem is the status quo that you're saying Trump is part of has been that you see these Western nations that are going in and doing things like color revolutions and making countries like Romania, Libya, Syria, etc. They're selectively choosing when they say we have a moralistic reason for going in there, whether it be overtly with military or covertly through color revolutions, and changing these countries to their whim and having this established order that has been continuing to do this for the past 40, 50 years. Trump's saying something where it's like, we feel that we've been taken advantage of primarily by those countries that are our allies. Like, for example, do you think that there are tariffs on the automobile industry from the EU countries to the United States?
It's about, depending on it. If last time I checked, depending on brand, depending on the type of vehicle, it goes anywhere between 25-30%. Correct me if I'm wrong. There are variable tariffs happening in Europe in the last 30-35 years. But of course, then the question is, if this is the point of division. We are saying that the United States took advantage of us. We're saying especially the Latin American and the so-called global
Well, that's
South.
selfish. That's selfish.
We're saying that United States took advantage of its
That's
foreign
selfish.
policy to enrich themselves and to
But that's selfish.
impose
Why are you
into
doing
it.
that? You just admitted that
It's
that's
the
bad.
same
That's
thing. It's the
selfish.
same thing. Why is
Right.
Trump saying that
So
the
it's
United
okay for-
States is being taken advantage of? It's selfish. So at the end, we have to recognize that the internal problems of each of our countries that have created or manifested in political instability has to do with our internal conflicts, ethnical or otherwise.
That's not true.
That aggravating those conditions by meddling into our particular issues only makes things worse.
But again, you're cheering for
it.
You cheered for that in Libya.
Look, let's be sincere. There are circumstances when the CIA comes in and says, okay, you got a political instability, let's kick in and let's fuel that situation more. So you can accept that without the already internal conflicts of the countries, that you had people who did not like Gaddafi, who said Gaddafi is a son of a gun, we want him out, we want freedom from Gaddafi, and that manifestation of rebellion was then fueled that already present. So what I'm saying is, instead of that selfish aspect of you fucked us, no, you fucked us, we have to accept, we would have to propose as follows. Look, each country has its own problems. A lot of those problems, especially in modernity, are pretty much standardized. You know, problems of how are we going to feed our people, how are we going to give them a good quality of life, how are we going to provide education, etc., etc., etc. Correct? That is happening throughout the whole world.
Yes.
But at the same time, why do we have to then deal with issues like the war on drugs impacting and making more difficult trying to reach those goals in our areas?
You're talking out of both sides of your mouth, and this is the problem, right? I've argued this forever. I don't have a problem with the United States leadership saying we're going to advocate first and foremost for the people of the United States. I'm not the biggest fan of these tariffs, by the way. I think they're being used as a negotiating tactic. I hope that they don't go into effect long term. But if it's used as a negotiating tactic to help the United States in more favorable business relationships, I'm fine with that. My belief is that the government of the United States or for any country should first and foremost be looking out for the people of their country. They should not intentionally seek to cause harm to other countries. So, for example, I wouldn't be for Costa Rica, the United States, Russia, the UK, wherever, saying, we don't like our neighbors, we're just going to bomb the shit out of them and take all of their stuff. I think that's bad. You might say, but that would be to benefit the people of the country, and didn't you say that's what you want leadership to do? Yes, but not to intentionally cause harm of direct impact of violence with things like that. So the difference that I'm saying is, we both agree fundamentally, look, we need a world where the status quo of the United States and the West going into each and every country and saying, this is how your government shall be ran, which is almost always being more advantageous to a certain select group of people and doesn't have the interest of the people in that individual country most at heart. That's true. That has to end. Whether that's Venezuela, whether it's Libya, whether it's Syria, whether it's Iraq, any of those places, that has to end. I think Trump represents that because I think that he's going against that established order that have done those things around the world. You're like, yeah, but he has tariffs. But tariffs are at least within the realm of acceptable behavior because that's saying, look, we're going to promote what companies we think should be allowed to sell here or whatever. That's different than going into a country and overthrowing their government. You, on the other hand, are saying, no, the tariffs are unacceptable. But what is acceptable is if there's some sort of internal strife within a country, it's acceptable for the United States and the West to have, one, a color revolution where it pushes to get one of those sides to win, and second, to have direct military intervention. Like in Libya. And to me, that's far more grotesque when you say, well, all of these countries have internal strife. They all have issues with healthcare. They all have issues with poverty. But then you're supporting the established order that you're criticizing when they took actions in places like Venezuela.
No, Rob, I do take issue on that because I consider that you're strawmanning the argument. Let me present the argument in a very simple fashion.
Okay.
One, you and I agree that especially post-war, the what you're calling the West, the foreign policy, mainly coming out of the United States, have made issues worse, even when there is conflict internally in XYZ country. Them coming in makes shit worse, and that's a fact. The war on drugs, Vietnam, Korea, Middle East, Afghanistan, and we can continue mentioning the different facts where United States involvement or the West involvement have made shit worse. That being said, we can also agree, and we have so, that the internal conflicts in each country and its neighboring areas, it's something that has to be resolved mainly and strictly by the sovereignty of those people. But in occasions when those conflicts prolong themselves and there's no end resolution and it starts spilling over on the neighbors, then there is a need of saying, okay, we have to work together to find a freaking solution for you.
That's absurd. So would you be for the United States using military intervention in Mexico right now?
Of course not.
Why?
I'm not saying I agree with military intervention.
Wait. The cartel's violence is spilling over into the United States. It's affecting us. So
Well,
in that instant, right, you've already laid the groundwork why it would be moral and just for the United States to intervene then. Because it's the neighbor, they're being negatively impacted through fentanyl deaths, through cartel violence that ends up in cities in the United States. The problem is, I'm not strawmanning you, I'm accurately representing you. The problem is, you're giving an exception. You're basically saying as follows, let me simplify it, and then see if you still think I'm strawmanning. In general, the policy should be to allow in countries to solve their own internal issues, and the rest of the world, particularly the world superpowers like in Europe and the United States, or Russia for that matter, or China, should stay out of it. They should stay out of it. Leave these countries, have these. But there are occasions where things get so muddled up in these countries that it is appropriate for these world superpowers to intervene. And the reason, one occasion that you could think of that would be when it starts to negatively affect the neighbors. The problem is every one of the interventions that these superpowers like the old United States or Europe will do, every single time they'll say, yep, that's this instance. Yep, that's what's going on in Libya. Yep, that's what's going on in Syria. Yep, that's what's going on in Iraq. And you've already admitted that there are hundreds of countries that we could point to and say, yeah, there are dictators there and they're doing bad things. Almost every one of those countries, I think that we could go through case by case and say why it would be negatively affecting neighboring countries to have that dictator there. So you've just given the rationale for the exact world order that you're saying needs to be upturned to continue in perpetuity. Because every single time they're going to say, yeah, we should intervene in this country. It also belies sort of, you're looking at things very simplistically. You're just looking at it from like, well, maybe you're not, but if you just look at it through a military invention, should we invade Libya? Should we send arms to the rebels in Libya? Right? And should that, right? That's how we're looking at it. But there's also this idea of color revolution, which is we could go into a country and do things like, do you know, for example, in Cuba, what was the name of the Twitter that was created in Cuba by USAID? It's a cool name.
I don't remember.
Means,
I know which one you're talking about, but I don't have it.
What is the word for hummingbird in Spanish?
I
think that was the name.
Hold on for a second. El colibrí. El colibrí.
Yeah, that wasn't it, but that's cool. Colibrí. By the way, I just want to take a moment to say the fact that you're on here talking with me in a second language, like I applaud you for coming on anyways. And it always amazes me how much smarter people are than me when they could have detailed conversations in languages and aren't their first. So
don't get me started in Spanish because then I go off. Don't get me started. Well, my French is at about 70%. Je parle français un peu. My Portuguese is there. I read better French and Portuguese than I speak it because I normally don't own it. I speak Bribri, which is the language of one of my tribes here in Costa Rica. But anyhow, go back to this point of conversation. And I'm so glad that you brought up the idea of the war on drugs. Okay.
But I'll just real quick say about Cuba. What the purpose of having this Twitter in Cuba was, it started off and it was like, oh, it's just to get cultural news and it's just to get weather news, which is important in Cuba, right? And so
I have to look up that Twitter again. I don't remember if it was at the Colibri or something in that line.
Yeah.
I know which one you're talking about, but right now I don't have it.
But you understand how that could, if that would have had enough, because the ultimate goal of that was to infiltrate the Cuban government and have sort of anti-communist groups come to power and be able to then affect elections in Cuba that ultimately would give a reason for there to be enough anger fomented in Cuba to want the current administration out that would give the United States the very excuse that you're talking about to say, well, now they need to come in and help them.
And actually, you gave a beautiful example on the war on drugs. Let's grab that and let's extend it. One, you said, do you agree with, or would you agree with military intervention against cartels now that they are declared as terrorists of the United States? I tell you no. But why is this? One, the war on drugs is a U.S. formed and created policy that then, through the United Nations and through the international codes that have been ratified in out of the 195 countries, 185 or 190, and that has created for the past 60 some odd years a one policy rules all type of function. Here's the thing. Look, Trump comes out and says, oh, we're going to declare one of his excuses for tariffs was precisely the fentanyl. Then saying, oh, well, we're going to declare this cartels as terrorists, particularly the ones in Mexico, right? Mm-hmm. But here's the thing. Why the so-called number one country in the world for the past 60 years has not been able to complete its objectives in matters of the war on drugs. And if you're fighting in the cartels of Mexico, Colombia, etc., you have internal U.S. citizen cartels who negotiate with the cartels of Mexico, bring in the drugs, and distribute those drugs into it. So here's the question. Why hasn't your president declared U.S. citizens who are dedicated to drug trafficking as terrorists also?
We may, if they're involved with those cartels.
Now, in this sense, here's the point I was going to give in this whole context. Here we have a prime example when shit hits other people's fans. The shit that was created and manifested in the United States for the past 60 years of the war on drugs has hit all of our fans. So the hypocrisy of Trump trying to tell us, oh, these are terrorists, but my guys, well, we might or we might not because we're too afraid and chicken
I think you're
shit.
misrepresenting that. I think you're misrepresenting that.
How?
For example,
How am I representing that?
Let's say he designates MS-13 a terrorist group. Do you have any evidence that he wouldn't consider an American citizen that was part of MS-13 a terrorist?
What if that, no, not what if, the cartels or the people who are in U.S. citizens distributing the drugs have their own names, have their own cartels, have their own organizations, and they're not part of MS-13.
It wouldn't matter. It would be similar to, like, what if they're working with ISIS?
Okay,
let me give me a second here to work this out. Do you think ISIS should be considered a terrorist organization?
Yeah, it is considered a terrorist organization.
If there's someone in the United States that's selling drugs to that ISIS is providing, maybe ISIS is in Afghanistan, they're selling poppies in the United States, some, gangster in the United States is selling it. Like, do you think that person should also be qualified as a terrorist?
Following the logic of what Trump is doing, and based on that, yeah.
Okay, well then
that's what Trump is doing.
So then
it should be.
My guess is what you're likely to see happen is there will be American citizens that will be arrested and charged with terrorist enhancers because they're working with terrorist organizations. I think that you'll see that.
What if these groups decide, as based on the Second Amendment, to organize themselves and fight back against that because they're saying Trump is being corrupt, he's misusing his power, we're going to fight him in that sense? Would you then agree that military intervention against U.S. citizens who are drug traffickers and who are part of that drug trafficking is also needed inside your country.
Yes, what's likely to happen, I'll tell you what I think would happen under the scenario that currently plays out. If the first thing that's going to happen is we have to secure the border, the best way to do that would be actually deploying the military to the southern border. That's something that should happen that stops all of these people coming in. Because the truth is, it's not just the cartels, but it's terror groups from around the world and hostile countries around the world and hostile groups around the world. That 12 million of people that came into this country under Joe Biden, there's certainly going to be a lot of people of that. So the number one is to stop how bad things are getting. Second is to deport people in this country that we find that are already criminals and that were involved in these sort of organizations, get them out as much as possible. But if we are able to secure the border, and it means that the cash flow of a lot of these cartels starts to dry up, you're going to see those cartels become more violent. And that means that there will be terror attacks in the United States. You will see cartel members do things like shoot up a restaurant or place explosives somewhere or a car attacks or something like that. Yes, those people that work with them will then be gone after by the U.S. military and treated as terrorists. That is my expectation of what's likely to happen.
For example, in the question of, the economic impact that you could have to the underground market of drugs.
Mm-hmm.
Are you aware how much money through the civil asset forfeiture, what we call in Spanish extinción de dominio, the CAF, a method, has incurred from organized crime in the last 15, 20 years?
I'm assuming it's that. So civil assets forfeiture is a fucking joke. Like, you could get caught like with a small bag of marijuana and they could take your Lamborghini. So I'd assume, I don't know the dollar figure, but I'd assume
$4.1 trillion in the last 15, 20 years.
From just the United States or from around the globe?
From just the United States.
Okay, so then your argument is that the economy of the United States will dry up if we fight the drug trade? I'm cool with that.
Okay, hold on. United States, in that same time period, spent $2.1 trillion in matters of fighting the war on drugs, alongside the $4.1 trillion that you put into Afghanistan. So we're talking about the last 20-ish years.
Okay.
So here's the thing. And going back to the macro conversation that we were having. Point being is that when we have this type of shit spilling over, affecting our realities and making shit worse than it should be, or that it could have been, that's when I say, and this works in the inverse. We're saying to the United States, and we've been saying it. You brought up the migration situation. Migration is fueled highly because of the issues of the war on drugs and the impacts and the displacement of those people because of the violence created by the war on drugs.
Most of it's economic migrant. That I do know enough to know that you're full of shit. Most of these people are economic migrants.
Yeah,
if
but
it was just about the war on drugs, then they would have stopped in Mexico.
Okay. When you're saying economic migrant, it's a bit disingenuous because you have to take into consideration that you have a series of displacements happening, especially in Mexico, the Triangle of the North, so on, that is originated because the impacts of organized crime in the rural areas, mainly or mostly in the rural areas of Latin America, that already have issues with economic problems, but they get even highly aggravated by the violence and the control and the feudalist control of organized crimes in those specific areas. That then forces a displacement of people towards it. It's not like, look, the overgeneralization of Trump in regards to migrants can be said the same thing about United States people that fly to our areas. That you're sending us your pedophiles, you're sending your criminals, and you're sending your people. And the case in Colombia just last year with Timothy Allen Livingston, who was a pedophile caught in Medellin, and then he ran out back to Utah to hide. You know,
It's not even remotely similar. We're talking about tens of millions of people in a 4-year span. We probably have 30 to 35 million total. 12 million came in under a 4-year span under Joe Biden, right? Those people that are breaking the laws of our country and coming here illegally. And you saying, well, that's like when a pedophile will run from the United States to Costa Rica. Okay,
No.
if a pedophile runs from the United States to Costa Rica, throw him in prison. Cool. And then we'll treat these illegals that came here the same way. It's not similar. Like, and furthermore, there's another thing that I want to talk to you about before we bring it back. When you say the war on drugs caused all of this, are you talking about specifically like the CIA and other places that are actively encouraging drug production in sort of Latin American countries?
Added to the whole thing. So
Or
let me
are
be
you
very
also
clear.
saying, let me, and the other part, because this is very important, or are you saying the fact that those drugs are illegal in the United States, which opens up a black market, which causes these Latin American gangs to be created in the first place? Or is it a combination of both?
No, okay, hold on. Yeah, kind of very simple. When I speak of, and when we speak of the one policy fits all through the United Nations and through the 3 international courts, that has meant that provision of those drugs is generalized from Canada down to Argentina through the anti-drug internal laws inside of our countries. So the same drugs that are illegal in the United States are illegal in Mexico, all the way to Argentina.
Sure.
Okay, so let's put that there.
Okay.
Second, when very clear, mierda, ¿cómo cuesta hablar en inglés a veces? Sorry, I have to say, damn, it's hard to speak in English sometimes and put your ideas there. So the other aspect is war on drugs and its impacts is one of the factors that fuels the issues of corruption in here, the issues of economic problems in here, the issues of displacement of people because of violence and the
but you
effects
keep going back to my question is what particularly on the war on drugs, because it seemed that what you just alluded to there was the fact that these are illegal universally, or is there more to it than that? When you keep saying the war on drugs is causing this, but that's what I'm asking specifically. What aspect is it? The fact that these drugs are illegal, which creates a black market, or is there more? That's my question.
So to make it simple, the war on drugs is like the application of the 18th Amendment worldwide, of your Constitution worldwide. So the legality of these drugs, like what happened with the legality of liquor back in the 20s, 33s, created and fueled and made the mafias and the organized crimes stronger. They made them so in such a way that it gave them an exponential growth. Why? Because it gave them the perfect excuse of a product that it was on high demand and that there was demand for it to be widespread.
I don't disagree, but here's the problem is, why are we talking about this? And it seems like if you take a step out here in a second, it seems to be what you're suggesting is, okay, you're saying that there are times when military intervention is necessary from these superpowers into sort of smaller countries if there's internal strife, that shit is spilling out that affects them. My claim is that that's a bad way to look at things, because you'll be able to make that excuse no matter what. They'll always do that. That's what they did in Libya, which is an intervention that you cheered for. I think that history bears me out
for it. I understood
You're defending
it, but I'm not defending it. I'm saying I understood the context to which that happened. That's the thing about Rob. So this is why I was trying to go back into the general sense.
But you understand the context. What I'm saying is that you'll always be able to understand the context, because they'll always make a claim for why they could do it. But the problem is, when you're like, it seems when I bring up the issue of, okay, well, these cartels, it's spilling over, violence, deaths, et cetera, and you're like, yeah, but morally, the United States has something to do with that. That seems to be why you're saying, but the war on drugs caused. Let me finish real quick. And if the argument is, well, that's because the United States and the CIA funded, Los Zetas cartel or whatever. They funded them here and they armed them here, and then that helped them get power. That's one thing. I totally agree with you. I think that our CIA has done that. But if the argument is, well, it's because the United States has said that these drugs should be illegal, I'm not sympathetic, even though I'm more libertarian in the country. I think that a country like the United States has the right to say, we don't want heroin. And if you say, yes, but by saying that, that will create a black market for heroin. And so then there'll be people in Mexico that will create a black market heroin industry, which will allow them to get power, which will allow them to negatively affect a community in Mexico. That's not the same moral culpability from the United States. Saying, well, just because we want it to be illegal, we're responsible because criminals around the world decide to create this stuff. So I don't buy that argument. I don't buy the argument just because the United States and other Western countries say we think heroin's illegal, that means that they're responsible for bad things happening in Venezuela if a cartel starts there and starts shipping heroin. I don't buy that argument.
Let me be very clear. One, United States carries that moral, a grade of that moral responsibility alongside the stupidity of my own politicians agreeing with the United States and applying that in our countries. So responsibility, there's a co-responsibility of this last 60 years. In your example, look at the historical precedent that happened in your own country between the decades of 20 and 33, especially with the application of the 18th Amendment. And this is going to go for then the whole general conversation, which I have not lost track of. I've kept it right here of that general conversation that we were having. When I say the war on drugs is the universal worldwide application of the failure of the 18th Amendment, is because of that precedent. So sovereignly, yeah, sure, a country can say, hey, listen, we don't want drugs. Fine. Good. But then don't force the rest of the world to play alongside with you. But at the same time, hold on. At the same time, the rest of the world was an idiot to play alongside with you.
Well, I don't disagree. But that's what when you're saying play alongside, because I think there's going to be big areas of agreement here. I think there have been times where you've seen, like, the United States intel agencies have propped up cartels and gangsters. That I get you.
Peter North.
Right. Like with the Contras and all that shit. Yeah, right. Like, so I'm with you there. The problem I have is like it seems that you're taking it a step further. Like, if the United States says we think heroin's illegal and the rest of the West says yeah, and you're like, well, then they're partially responsible for convincing my country to also make heroin illegal. I don't buy that. Like, to me, that's not a negative, particularly when, like, this whole conversation, to bring it back, because I do have to get going soon, like, it comes down to a conversation of, is Trump a we're both agreeing that sort of the status quo order of sort of these superpowers going into all these small countries and saying, we're going to mold you to be basically a vassal state of ours to be benefit, that shit needs to stop. I'm saying Trump's more of a departure of that than sort of the G7 countries that you started off sort of supporting, saying that they're against Trump and that Trump's playing with fire. I think those countries represent exactly what you're criticizing, and Trump's clearly a break from that, even if he's doing things that you might not like in other aspects. I think that he is representing more of a turn toward, like, I'm going to turn inward to America first. We're not going to be interested in sort of color revolutions in Romania, locking up political opponents, National Endowment for Democracy, going into Poland and saying locking up populists, locking up Bolsonaro in places like Brazil, going into places like Libya, going into places like Syria. We're against that. And then it seems, though, that, like, you have this weird, like, you're like, well, I guess you're saying now it's not a defense when we're talking about Libya specifically, but you have this, like, yeah, we shouldn't be interfering in other nations, but at the same time, if there's strife in another nation and one political party is jostling against another, maybe there is room for these superpowers to come in and help influence the elections. And I think in every aspect, that's what you're criticizing far more than tariffs. That's far more damaging to an internal country's democracy and sovereignty, actually putting your thumb on the scale of who wins elections because these countries want someone that's more favorable to them. So I'm against that. And I therefore support Trump more because of that. And it seems like I think you just hate Trump. And so that you're unwilling to see how you're literally arguing for a position that seems to be antithetical to, like, what your entire worldview is, that you've been a victim yourself or seen countries be victims yourself of what happens when these superpowers meddle within the country.
And just so we can have closure on this first, Rob, thank you for having me. Great conversation.
I had a lot of fun. I did. Thank you.
Yeah. And so I can transmit and have my position understood in this sense. One, I do not see Trump as that, as a rebel antithesis position of the status quo. What I see him as a selfish, where his position is, we'll meddle when we want to meddle, and when we don't want to meddle, we won't meddle. The issues of the tariffs, the issues of his comments with Greenland and Panama, the realities that are happening throughout Ukraine and Russia, the Israel and Gaza situation, etc. But what people like me who have been working on this for the past 25 years of their lives, put their lives on risk and tried to do changes, we advocate for a clear international cooperation where, if necessary, when necessary, but not under the criteria of one nation or the criteria of one empire, but under all of us sitting down, including the country that is affected, there's the need of working and cooperating alongside each other. Then that becomes a valid form of what you would call a global intervention. But there's no doubt that the current status quo of how things were done is something that has to die. Russia has to end. China has to end. United States empire has to end. European centric empires have to end. And it's time for a world where we treat each other equally. In the sense that it doesn't matter how big you are or how small you are.
Can I still, man, when you say has to end, you don't mean like the country collapsing. You mean the way that they've. Just to be clear, you're not saying Russia has to end. That mean right? I got you. I just want to make it clear to everyone.
Metaphorically, I'm talking metaphorically in that sense.
I just want to clear that. I assumed, but I didn't want the audience to get the wrong idea that you're like calling for like the attack on all of these.
I mean, I'm on that point of ending. I'm not saying violence, death to America, burn. No. What I'm saying the way things have been doing has to end. And that we have to change. Whatever changes happen in the United States or Russia or China, it's up to their people, not up to me to decide.
Right.
That's the point of the whole contesting. And again, in that sense, I think that I don't. Obviously, we don't. Many of us don't trust Trump. We see him as the Maduro of, or the Hugo Chavez of the United States, or the Daniel Ortega of the United States in many ways. And right now, everything that is happening is just, it's not giving us that feeling of change. It's giving us the feeling that we're heading down. If we were heading down this big ass gutter, now we're heading to a smaller gutter and we're being pushed into it. Type of thing.
Well, I disagree with you. I think that there's like a lot of just irrational Trump hatred that comes from people. I certainly could see why there's ways to criticism, but I think that he represents a departure more from that status quo that's done far more damage. We see it playing out in Romania as we speak now. I think you see it playing out in Syria as we speak now as Christians are being crucified. But nonetheless, I think we do have a lot of agreement on sort of the idea of countries looking out for their own interests, but not meddling in countries to try to make them vassal states. So I think that there is agreement that comes there with a lot of it. And I always enjoy having you on. So it's a fun conversation. Hopefully we'll be able to talk soon. I would stay later, but I have stuff that I have to take care of.
Yeah, I also have stuff to take care of. By the way, what does your shirt say? I've been curious.
This is Democracy Manifest. Did you ever see this YouTube video of this guy?
I may have seen it. I'm not.
What is the crime? Eating a meal? A succulent Chinese meal? It's hilarious. Look it up. Just YouTube
look it up,
succulent Chinese meal. You'll see what I'm talking about.
All right, I'll look it up and see. But Rob, again,
where could people find you if they want to find you? Do you have?
I still haven't had. I'm doing this just because it helps me practice my English. But also, I don't have a page. I've kind of like quit social media to an extent. I may start posting videos through this page, Ditso, the one that I'm talking on. At Ditso. What's my page? I don't even freaking know. Hold on. Well, here's my page. Coño de la madre, pero es que con esta tecnología de mierda. Voy.
See if I can find
suave. Mierda, ¿dónde estoy? Hold on. Well, I think it's a Ditso something.
Ditso Cultural Group?
No, that's that would be it. Here we go. Me, you. At Dan Ditso. That's the channel right
Put
now.
it in.
I haven't had.
Can you put it in the chat?
Sure. I mean, I haven't uploaded any video or anything. I've been thinking about doing.
Well,
my first videos would be in regards of Afro descendancy.
What's up to
Latin
you? You
American.
certainly don't have to put if you don't want, but if you think that you'll start posting there, I always like to give people a chance to,
Yeah, I put it on the chat, on the private chat right now. At that Dan Ditso, that would be the current one that is showing on my page.
Okay, and that's just on YouTube?
YouTube, yeah, for the moment being. I mean, but again, Rob, muchas gracias por tenerme. Thank you for having me. Beshko Wolaba, walk with your eyes open. We may disagree on certain things, but cordiality is always a must on this type of conversations. And I do thank you for that. You are a cordial person, and I appreciate that. And I love having these conversations, even if we agree on some things, disagree on others. Hopefully that helps us to grow better and improve democracy and freedom.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. You have a good day, and hopefully we'll talk soon.
Pura vida.
All right. There, I got his YouTube channel in there. So if it's something that you enjoy, ultimately, the best point he makes, ironically, he makes there in his closing statement. It's like an aside. Yeah, the things he's criticizing, the Panama and Greenland thing, I think would be not tariffs, but I feel like he's like making like a big long point that's really going nowhere. That's just like, I don't like Trump. I don't know how you could defend sort of the G7 countries and sort of like saying like, oh, these countries historically have gone into these countries and meddled into affairs and blah, 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 blah. But I like totally support them when they're against Trump on this. It doesn't make sense. And then sort of, I don't know, I guess he later said he wasn't defending like the actions of places like Libya, but like he seemed to defend Yugoslavia, the intervention, the NATO intervention there. Like to me, I've always been of the, like, I'm not a big fan of tariffs, but a country saying, hey, we think this drug should be illegal, or a country saying we're going to put a 25% tariff on automobiles, that's one thing that I think is morally within the rights of that country to do. A country saying, well, we don't like the way the election in Romania is going, so we're going to put all kinds of money into boosting up the opposition and then encouraging them to make it illegal for the guy that was going to win. Or we're going to go into Poland and we're going to put all kinds of money into sort of judicial races so that we get judges that then will prosecute the pro-populist party that formerly held power. Or we're going to support the people in Brazil that want to lock up Bolsonaro, the former president and the front runner for winning president the next time. Or we're going to go into Libya and leave it an absolute smoking hellhole, or the same as Syria, because, we advocate for the, those are the things that I think are beyond the pale. And as someone who maybe was in a country like Venezuela or, other places like that, I could understand having a mighty anger at the policies of the United States, particularly in the past, where you think that they've came in through color revolution or other things and really put their thumb on the scale of your own sovereignty. That makes total sense to me. I don't disagree. But it's weird to me to hear someone who's calling out that stuff and then it's like, well, that's why I'm for the G7 plan in Ukraine. And like Trump's playing with fire by like being like, hey, we should have a peaceful resolution. And to me, it just seems strange. Let's get to some super chats. Max Reddit, again, thank you so much, man, for another $10. Says, Rob, you've mentioned this before, but the left takes everything Trump says literally true, but then when he says is directionally true. Also, you should call out Pac-Man and Cedar to debate. I've called out Pac-Man and Cedar. I don't really have a big platform. I've talked to people that host debates. When I was on Tim Pool's show, I mentioned both of those. My understanding was they reached out to both of them and neither were available to debate me on that. But yeah, the idea of taking what Trump literally says is true, but then directionally it might be true. So Trump might say like, there was a grenade attack last night in Sweden and there's no-go zones. And the Democrats will go, there was no attack yesterday in Sweden. That's garbage. And there are no-go zones. And it's like, well, yeah, there are. Directionally, what he's saying is true, even if the literal wasn't. Ben, for $5, thank you. It says, it's funny the English can't speak English because they'll get arrested for speaking. Yeah, funny, tragic. Certainly true. Debate Jola. I don't know who Jola is. Sure, I'll debate anyone. As long as it's not like going to get me in trouble, terms of service or anything like that. Yeah, Andy B, I'd love to talk to you about economics someday. So next time you'll probably hear me is Sunday evening, either Sunday evening or Monday evening. So I'm going to go enjoy the rest of my day. I think it's going to be a great one, hanging out with my brother-in-law for his birthday. So it should be good stuff. Thank you to everyone that donated tonight. I really appreciate it. Thanks to all my callers. I thought the callers were great. It's interesting to hear Ditzo there talk about how respectful I am, because half the people that call are like, you're a piece of shit, blah, blah, blah. I usually try to reciprocate energy. So, that's usually where I fall on that. So if someone's being respectful, I try to give that back. But yeah, great show today. I hope you all enjoyed it. You all have a good one, and hopefully we'll see you soon. I'm supposed to say that at the end. As always, everyone, have a good one.